Chapter 343. When Itachi said that he was still a wood-leaf ninja, Itachi Uchiha, Nangonja could easily perceive that Itachi's whole spirit had changed. Although he was also born with leaf, but compared to Nangonja, who was born and raised in wood-leaf, he couldn't understand the pride of being a wood-leaf ninja. But not understanding doesn't mean that Nangonja has any prejudice against such a Itachi Uchiha. On the contrary, Nangonja appreciated this kind of Itachi very much, because Itachi's almost blind loyalty to wood-leaf is actually the same as Nangonja's unconditional protection and trust for his family. Little Linger, Mashiro, and Nangonro are Nangonja's spiritual sustenance, and wood-leaf is naturally Itachi's spiritual sustenance. In the end, Nangonja and Itachi are somewhat similar in some aspects. This is one of the reasons why the two still cooperate very smoothly even though they don't have a deep friendship. Speaking of Akatsuki, have you started the operation against Bijou again during this time? I also know that this matter involves Bijou, so I must ask you to meet me in person. Bijou is really a sensitive matter. Nangonja looked at Itachi and finally asked his question. For the ninja world, Bijou is no different from a strategic resource. Just like the nuclear weapons between various countries, it is a weapon full of deterrence. After all, as long as Column Force doesn't reveal the aura of Bijou in his body, almost no one can detect it. Once a war breaks out, Bijou Column Force can easily sneak into the strategic towns of other countries and directly release the power of Bijou in his body to wreak havoc. After that, Chakra can directly put away the Bijou and leave easily. And the Akatsuki organization's desire for Bijou is much more than those countries and villages. Not to mention anything else. Would anyone stand against Konoha just because they want to take the Kyuubi into their own hands? If it was someone else, perhaps everyone would raise their middle finger and praise them as idiot. But Akatsuki really did so, and even caused a lot of damage to the woodleaf. The Akatsuki has taken action against the tailed beasts. After hearing Nangonja's words, Itachi didn't react for a while. As soon as he saw Itachi's reaction, Nangonja knew that Itachi didn't know about this operation. Therefore, Nangonja told him about the crazy man he met when he went to Little Linger's hometown. Floating in the air, attacking with a wave of his hand, striking hair color, Itachi began to recite the main points of the characteristics that Nangonja had mentioned. His eyes also began to slowly turn piercingly cold. Sure enough, this person isn't an ordinary person in the Akatsuki organization. If you are sure that the crazy man you just said is the truth, in the Akatsuki organization, there's only one person who fits the characteristics you just described, and that is the leader of the organization, God Pain. This person's identity is also very suspicious. In the information you gave me before, there are 3 founding elders of Akatsuki: Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan. This Pain, who has always been the leader of Akatsuki, is very similar to the description you gave me about Yahiko. But you and I both know that as the original leader of Akatsuki, Yahiko has already died in the hands of Shimura Danzo and Hanzo the Salamander. On the contrary, the person named Nagato has never appeared in front of me, which makes me very confused. Nagato, Yahiko, Pain. Nangonja suddenly felt that he seemed to have touched upon a very interesting truth, and looking at Itachi's appearance, it was obvious that he had some doubts. In that case, it seems that the Akatsuki organization has been hiding from you to drive away the tailed beast to a certain extent. From your description, it is naturally not difficult to analyze that this person named Pain has the ability to fight the tailed beast alone, and from the words of the survivor, we can also know that this Sanbai Isabu is actually being chased away. So, can we assume that defeating the tailed beast is not Pain's goal, but more likely he wants to drive the Sanbai to a place where he can effectively monitor it? The Sanbai itself is now in a wild state, and as the Akatsuki organization who is interested in collecting tailed beasts, it may be because of various reasons that they can't directly capture the Sanbai, but they also hope that this target can always be in their sight and easily controlled. And the Sanbai is an extremely lazy creature. Once it starts to live in a place, as long as there's enough food and no one disturbs it, it can always live in one place. So, what Pain wants to do is naturally simple. That is, to set off alone, so that those who monitor the Akatsuki organization can't discover his actions, and then use his own power to forcibly drive the Sanbai away from its habitat. And along the way, choose a remote place as the route to drive the Sanbai away. The village that Little Ling originally lived in was located in a remote area. The village was surrounded by dense forests, which naturally met Pain's requirements. Little Linger's village suffered an unexpected disaster and became a small and insignificant sacrifice in Pain's action. Nangongja doesn't know Pain, but Itachi is in the Akatsuki organization, so naturally, he has some understanding of Pain's philosophy. Pain has always claimed that his actions are for the eternal peace of the shinobi world, although he doesn't know what Pain is going to do. But from what Nangongja said, it is naturally not difficult to judge that Pain actually doesn't care so much about the lives of ordinary people. Itachi. Nangongja was silent for a long time, and finally said to Itachi Uchiha, "Although we don't know the specific plan of the Akatsuki organization, but Tailed Beast must be an important part of it. So I hope you can try to find out where Pain is keeping the Sanbai in captivity. Since it is the target of his own surveillance, he will naturally send people to monitor it. Once there is a transfer of personnel, there is naturally no way to completely hide it. I need you to help me find out all the useful information." Itachi heard Nangongja's words and also nodded very seriously. Nangongja actually just wants to make things difficult for the Akatsuki organization, so he hopes that he can destroy their plan of keeping the Sanbai in captivity. And Itachi is concerned about the huge ambition of the Akatsuki organization. He hopes that he can stop the Akatsuki organization from carrying out such a crazy plan. Obviously, they have different starting points, but they're on the same path. In this way, it is very interesting. Chapter 344. Whether it was Itachi or Nangongja, they were very concerned about finding the Sanbai's habitat and destroying the Akatsuki's plan. With the information provided by Itachi and the cooperation of many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, they were gradually able to narrow down the Sanbai's location to a certain extent. Originally, the Sanbai was sealed in the body of the Wood Leaf Shinobi, Harano Rin, by the Mist Shinobi. They hoped that with her special physique, the Sanbai could wreak havoc in the Wood Leaf area, but they were stopped by Kakashi. The Sanbai was severely injured because of Rin's death. After that, the first trace of the Sanbai was found in a small country called the Country of Bears between the Water Country and the Country of Fire. In order to make it easier for them to monitor the Sanbai, the Rain Village must have placed the Sanbai in a relatively close position. The Sanbai itself is of the water attribute and has a different affinity and dependence on water. Therefore, the only places suitable for the Sanbai survival and close to the Akatsuki sphere of influence are the Country of River, the Country of Waterfall, and the Country of Rain, where the Akatsuki is located. Since the Akatsuki wasn't so eager to deal with the Sanbai, and even spent so much effort to expel the Sanbai from a remote place, it's very likely that the Sanbai wasn't confined in the Country of Rain. Therefore, Nangongja and Itachi focused their investigation on the Country of River and the Country of Waterfall. When a large number of people are scattered, no matter how secretly the Akatsuki mobilizes people, they will still be exposed. Gradually, Nangongja and Itachi were able to determine that the Sanbai was most likely hidden in the Country of Waterfall. First of all, the Country of Waterfall is rich in rainfall, and there are many swamps and lakes. Compared to the Country of River, the Country of Waterfall is undoubtedly more suitable for the Sanbai's long-term habitat. Second, there is the Country of Grass between the Country of Waterfall and the Country of Rain. Even if someone found the whereabouts of the Sanbai, they would only think that it was done by the neighboring countries, such as the Country of Grass, Country of Frost, Country of Fire, and Country of Earth. They wouldn't put their eyes on a powerful force like the Akatsuki. After arranging some matters, Nangongja left Wood Leaf Village and headed towards the Waterfall Country. Along the way, Nangongja used his leg strength to the extreme. From the Wood Leaf in the hinterland of the Land of Fire to the Land of Waterfall, It only took him 3 days and 2 nights to cover a quarter of the distance of the shinobi world. The waterfall country was a country with a lot of water, so there weren't many tall trees. Instead, there were many shorter shrubs. After walking for a while, they could clearly hear the sound of flowing spring water. At this moment, Nangongja didn't care about the dew on the shrubs. He just lay down in the shrubs and carefully observed the hidden tent in front of him. This camp was built based on the surrounding terrain and plants. Almost 3/4 of it was hidden in the soil, rocks, and trees, while the remaining 1/4 was carefully concealed by someone. If it was really a hurried glance, it would be really difficult to find the clues. Nangongja also noticed by chance that something was wrong here. At the same time, there was a very large, deep pool near the camp, so Nangongja decided to lurk in this place and carefully observe where the people came from. Just after Nangongja lurked in the shrubs for 2 hours, finally, a figure gradually walked into this very hidden tent. Just as this figure was about to approach the hidden tent, suddenly from 2 slightly dark corners, a figure with an Amigakure forehead appeared. Others don't know, but how could Nangongja not know that the Amigakure has long been controlled by the Akatsuki? These ninjas with the Amigakure forehead are members of the Akatsuki. Nangongja believed that in this hidden camp, there must be detailed information about Isabu. If he could obtain such information, then it would be more feasible to destroy Akatsuki organization's captive breeding plan. After all, for everyone, tailed beast, this kind of creature was still in a kind of half-understood state. If he can get the research information about the Sanbai, then naturally, it will save a lot of unnecessary trouble, so why not? Therefore, in order to ensure that the information he wants to get is not destroyed by these ninjas, Nangongja decided to assassinate these ninjas of the Amigakure. Looking at the ninja who seemed to come to report entered the tent after a series of checks, Nangongja also observed a little bit of movement in many hidden places. If it is an ordinary person, it is naturally difficult to detect the reason, but Nangongja is an experienced ninja, so it is easy to judge that these places are the distribution of some hidden sentries. Nangongja quietly pulled out the sword behind his back from the scabbard. The dark sword ridge reflected Nangongja's cold face. At this moment, his face has slowly emerged with a somewhat cruel smile, as if he is very excited about being able to freely hunt. If other people saw this, they will be instantly creeped out. Under the effect of exquisite movements, Nangongja's figure instantly disappeared from the place. At this moment, Nangongja's figure has quietly appeared in the most remote sentry post from the camp. It was similar to an ordinary sentry post. In order to prevent a person from being distracted sometimes, there are 2 ninjas in this sentry post to take care of each other. Nangongja's figure has quietly appeared behind the 2 ninjas. Obviously, he walks step by step into the hidden sentries, but the 2 ninjas completely seem to be unaware of anything, still staring at the area they are monitoring. At this moment, a faint layer of bloody brilliance covered Nangongja's sword at the moment. This bloody brilliance is another application of his murderous aura that Nangongja explored. Then, when the sword cut into the enemy's flesh, he could directly let his killing intent enter the enemy's body, instantly suppressing all of the enemy's movements. Even if the enemy died, it would be difficult for the enemy to let out a scream. This kind of move is suitable for assassination. There will not be the slightest movement that should not appear. Moreover, the murderous aura wrapped by his internal force is also extremely difficult to detect. For a place like this, it is impossible for Akatsuki to send their own Kage-level powerhouse to guard. After all, if such a powerhouse is sent out, it is impossible to hide it from Itachi. Chapter 345. Blood was quietly spilled on the ground. Nangongja has basically eliminated all the sentries outside the Akatsuki's camp. Only the main personnel and the big tent needs to be dealt with. Nangongja also carefully observed whether there were enchantments set up around the camp. Sure enough, there were some simple and easy-to-operate enchantments to locate the enemy. Nangongja has not seen 1,000 of such barriers, but he has seen at least 800 of them. There is really nothing new about them. After a little bit of movement on several important nodes, a loophole easily appeared on the barrier. Through this loophole, Xianxia was finally able to see the whole picture of the camp. There are nearly 20 large and small tents in this camp, and roughly estimated that there are at least 100 ninjas in it. Among these people, except for the 20 ninjas he just killed in the periphery and the ninjas who were responsible for observing the sandby, Xianxia estimated that there should be about 50 ninjas in this camp. Nearly 100 ninjas, even if a large part of them are genin and chunin, it's already a huge force for an ordinary ninja village. But Akatsuki can directly place such a force directly here to keep an eye on the sandby. On the one hand, it is naturally because the sandby is very important to Akatsuki, and on the other hand, isn't it because Akatsuki is rich and doesn't mind such a force being idle? Still according to his previous plan, as much as possible, silently kill the ninjas of Akatsuki, not giving them the opportunity to destroy the information, so as to find a way to destroy their captive plan. Xianxia quietly entered a tent, using his with Leaf White Fang's assassination method, and constantly killing the ninjas in it. And Xianxia was also very careful to control the amount of blood he killed, making the smell of blood as vague as possible. In such a big tent, generally the weaker people were placed in the periphery and the stronger people were placed in the middle. Xianxia also followed such an experiment, and began to eliminate these ninjas of Akatsuki organization in a circle as if he was peeling silk from a cocoon. With the passage of time, Xianxia's assassination target is also getting stronger and stronger. In order to achieve his goal, Xianxia's killing frequency has also begun to sharply decrease. Xianxia at this moment can clearly feel that his physical strength and spirit have reached an extremely exhausted state. Such a high-intensity assassination can no longer continue like this. Combined with the general strength of the ninjas he killed in this big tent, Xianxia believes that there are at most 3 Jonin ninjas in this big tent. As an internal energy practitioner who can restrain chakra to a certain extent, and his strength has also reached Kage level, at this time, perhaps the most effective way to quickly kill these ninjas of Akatsuki is to directly go out and use his most proficient posture to quickly kill these ninjas of Akatsuki. After thinking for a little bit, Xianxia finally decided to directly go all out to kill all the remaining ninjas of Akatsuki. After all, the reason why he chose to assassinate just now is to let those ninjas in the periphery have no time to inform the ninjas in the big tent to destroy the key information. Now that he has almost killed all the ninjas of the periphery, naturally there's no need to worry about this aspect. So why should he use a method that he is not so proficient in to carry out this kind of mission? So, Xianxia finally came out from the shadows. His black clothes fluttered without wind. His black hair wantonly fluttered. But what is more conspicuous is still Xianxia's pair of bright eyes and the dark, simple, long sword in his hand. A kind of surging momentum was born from Xianxia's body, just like the center of a tornado, calmly standing in the same place. But the surrounding tents of Xianxia, because of the storm formed by Xianxia's momentum. For a long time, unexpectedly no one came out from the central tent. Xianxia's heart also began to be vigilant. This situation is not what he expected. After all, Xianxia is not a professional perception ninja. Although Xianxia can do this kind of thing, but he is not so proficient in it. When he found that the rest of the ninjas in the big tent all gathered to fight with him, as he imagined, Xianxia also immediately became vigilant, directly unsheathing the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand, and walked towards the biggest tent in the big tent. Using his scabbard to lift the curtain of the tent, Xianxia only saw a strangely dressed person sitting on the table of the main tent, 1 foot on the table. The other foot was hanging in the air, casually swinging. Xianxia saw this strange person, and this strange person naturally also saw Xianxia. He seemed to be a little surprised as he stretched out his finger towards Xianxia, and the face covered by the mask with only one hole impressively revealed a 3-tomo Sharingan. A member of the Uchiha clan? Xianxia immediately judged the possible identity of this person in front of him, but he instantly denied his opinion. After all, the Uchiha clan has been exterminated, and he knows the survivors, whether it is the figure or the posture of this guy, he is not familiar with the few people he is familiar with. In the Wood Leaf, there is also Kakashi, who is obviously not a member of the Uchiha clan, but still has a Sharingan, isn't it? Who are you? Nangongja looked at the person in front of him with a mask, a black robe, and a head of pineapple-like hair. But this person seems to have not heard Nangongja's question and the murderous intent contained in it, but directly jumped up from the table he was sitting on. He directly trotted to Nangongja's side, and at the moment, the 3 Tomo Sharingan swept over Nangongja's body and face, and even praised from time to time. Isn't this the famous Yama of the Wood Leaf ninja world? It's rare. I didn't expect to meet such a famous person in this boring mission. It's really a pleasant surprise. Wait a minute. Can I ask you to give me an autograph? After saying that, this guy actually seemed to be fumbling all over his body to find a pen and paper for Nangongja to sign. Nangongja was already somewhat angry because of the previous slaughter, and now seeing this strange guy's appearance in front of him, he was too lazy to suppress the anger in his heart for a while, and directly took out his tribulation sword and directly pierced the guy's chest. Chapter 346. The moment the Heaven's Calamity sword pierced through the strange person in front of him, Nangongja immediately pulled his sword out of the person's chest. He even exerted force with his feet and jumped back to distance himself from this strange person. Why? That was because Nangongja's sword, which had clearly hit its target, did not feel real at all when it pierced into the man's body. But Nangongja could clearly perceive that the man in front of him wasn't an illusion, but a real existence. Regardless of whether this ability was a Kekkei Genkai or a unique ninjutsu, the most important thing to do now was to open up the distance between them. You? Who are you? Nangongja looked at the strange man and asked the same question. However, compared to his disdainful tone at the beginning, Nangongja's tone had become more serious. It was obvious that the masked man was very displeased with Nangongja's attitude. I thought that the Yama King of Konoha would be a little more interesting, but I didn't expect him to be so boring. Do you want to know who I am? It doesn't matter if I tell you. This uncle is called Hoodlum, Akatsuki's first official member candidate. Hearing Hoodlum's words, Nangongja actually didn't believe him. After all, through Itachi's information, Nangongja already knew what kind of people the Akatsuki's official members were. Except for Konan and Pain, who hadn't shown their full strength, the other official members were indeed talented in various aspects. To a certain extent, they could also be comparable to Kage-level experts. Even if they had the advantage, they still had the opportunity to defeat Kage-level experts. And this hoodlum in front of him clearly had the ability to let attacks pass through his body without causing any harm. Although he couldn't see for the time being whether this ability could let all physical and energy pass through his body, and what was the limit of this ability. But in Nangongja's opinion, a person with this kind of ability was fully qualified to become an official member of the Akatsuki, and not like what Hoodlum said, he was only a first official member candidate. But even in the face of such a strange ability, Nangongja didn't intend to shrink back. In the past few days, Nangongja also found that his behavior was becoming more and more unlike what he should be doing. Perhaps it was because of the expulsion of Danzo from Konoha, or perhaps it was because he let his 3 family-like existences leave the Bloodcloak Pavilion and the Lion Clan space that he felt was very safe. Therefore, Nangongja hoped that he could save his own life and the lives of his family. Due to various reasons, Nangongja also clearly sensed that he was beginning to weaken. The iron-blooded Yama, who made people tremble in fear on the battlefield back, then seemed to have quietly changed at this moment. His heart, that was as hard as iron, had actually begun to slowly melt. Nangongja tightly held the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand. This time, he wanted to try and change it. Seemingly aware of the change in Nangongja's mentality, Hoodlum, who looked very sloppy just a moment ago, also slowly straightened his slightly bowed body. One of his hands also slowly pulled out a kunai from his back, one hand holding the kunai, while the other hand pressed on the kunai in his hand. Obviously, he was ready to fight. To be honest, although you have always been called the Yama of Woodleaf, I still know the relationship between you and Woodleaf. So if possible, I really have no reason to fight with you." As he spoke, Hoodlum glanced at Nangong's clearly very determined eyes and laughed self-deprecatingly. "However, I think that you have already made up your mind to fight with me. There's no point in talking anymore. Let's fight first." As he spoke, Nangongja directly drew his sword and ran towards Hoodlum. Nangongja held the disaster sword with both hands and placed it next to his left ear. The inner strength in his body circulated at high speed, mixing with killing intent and hostility as it wrapped around the disaster sword. There were even strands of undetectable sword chi that wrapped around the disaster sword. Gusts of wind quietly wrapped around Nangongja's body as he ran. Slowly, the wind became stronger and stronger. Regardless of whether it was the surrounding tent curtains or the dust on the ground, they were all blown away by the wind. At this moment, Nangongja was like a ferocious tiger descending from the mountain or a dragon dancing in the sky. His aura was extremely powerful and domineering. Hoodlum, who was standing opposite of Nangongja, naturally felt it the most. However, he still looked fearless as he quietly watched Nangongja charge towards him. It seemed that no matter how Nangongja prepared to attack him, he wouldn't lose. However, Nangongja wasn't affected by Hoodlum's attitude at all. Instead, he fell into an extremely mysterious state. Back when Nangongja entered the Wood Leaf Academy, he relied on a state called Heart Sacrifice Technique to defeat Hitaki Kakashi in swordsmanship. He even received Hitaki Mao Shua's favor. However, over the years, it had become increasingly difficult for Nangongja to enter such a state. Today, Nangongja was completely immersed in his sword for the first time in a long time. Ignoring Hoodlum's expression and his surroundings, Nangongja suddenly had a strong desire in his heart. Swing the sword. Swing the sword nonstop. It wasn't to defeat his enemy, nor was it to familiarize himself with swordsmanship. It was purely to swing the sword. That strong desire was like a thirsty person craving for spring water or a hungry person craving for food. It was a primitive desire that came from his own blood and body. Finally, Nangongja's body was in front of Hoodlum. His own calamity sword could also attack Hoodlum. The desire to swing the sword from the depths of his heart could no longer be suppressed. Hoodlum, who was facing Nangongja, seemed to want to say something, but Nangongja directly slashed his own face. Nangongja wasn't clear about Hoodlum's ability, but Hoodlum was clear about it. The so-called immunity to attacks was actually a transfer of a part of one's body to another space, allowing one's body to avoid being attacked. However, since a part of one's body had been transferred, it naturally wouldn't be able to display its original effect. Therefore, Hoodlum, who was about to speak, could only passively, actively. His words were interrupted. Chapter 347. When Hoodlum saw Nangongja's sword slash across his neck, his throat was transferred to his body. Just as Hoodlum was about to open his mouth to escape, Nangongja directly slashed at his shoulder joint. Nangongja's sword was extremely fast, so Hoodlum could only restrain himself and redirect Nangongja's attack. Limbs, joints, internal organs, and any other fatal or serious weakness of the human body were all attacked by Nangongja's sword. Hoodlum didn't have a chance to speak at all. He could only passively move a part of his body to avoid being hit. Just looking at the Red Heaven's Calamity sword in Nangongja's hand, Hoodlum already felt great pressure. Nangongja, who was frantically swinging his sword, completely ignored Hoodlum's predicament. Instead, he seemed to be enjoying himself. The internal energy and sword energy covering the Heaven's Retribution sword started to dissipate bit by bit, causing the originally ferocious Heaven's Retribution sword to return to its original dark and simple appearance. Although the internal energy and sword energy were dispersed, Hoodlum didn't know why, but he felt that Nangongja's sword had become even more ferocious. The current state of the two of them was extremely comical. Hoodlum was like a wooden puppet, standing in a daze on the spot. Because his joints were constantly being attacked by Nangongja, he couldn't exert any strength. Nangongja's sword was originally very fast, and it was as if the entire sky was filled with the afterimages of his sword. Smoke and dust surged around Xianxia, making him look very imposing. But now, it was as if he had lost all of his strength. His sword danced very slowly, but one could faintly see that Xianxia's arm had transformed into several afterimages that attacked different parts of Hoodlum's body. As the one being attacked, Hoodlum naturally knew that it wasn't that Xianxia's speed had slowed down, but that his speed was too fast. It was beyond the range of what could be seen with the naked eye. The arm and the Heaven's Retribution sword that could be seen with the naked eye were the result of countless afterimages overlapping. Everything seemed to be in a stalemate as time passed minute by minute. Xianxia didn't seem to be affected, but Hoodlum didn't seem to be as confident as before. Suddenly, Hoodlum gathered all the chakra that he could control and released it. The shockwave from the chakra forced Xianxia back by half a step. Hoodlum also took advantage of this opportunity to absorb his body into a spatial vortex and appear far away from Xianxia. Spatial ninjutsu. Previously, Xianxia wasn't able to distinguish what kind of ninjutsu Hoodlum used to avoid his attacks. However, after attacking for so long, Xianxia was able to detect spatial fluctuations. In order to avoid Xianxia's pursuit, Hoodlum skillfully used a spatial ninjutsu that allowed him to appear in another place. More importantly, Xianxia wasn't able to discover Hoodlum's method of avoiding his attacks, but he discovered a possible weakness of Hoodlum's ninjutsu. This weakness was very obvious, and that was time. One must know that when Xianxia and Hoodlum were fighting just now, the two of them were actually in a strange stalemate. If Hoodlum could continue using his ninjutsu, then he would naturally be able to continue this strange stalemate. However, Hoodlum's mentality began to change, and he seemed to be very unwilling to continue this stalemate. He directly compressed the chakra in his body and released it. Compressing chakra and releasing it wasn't a simple matter. To do so, not only did he have to have extreme control over his own chakra, but he also had to bear the possibility of the violent chakra constantly destroying his body. Although Hoodlum looked calm, Xianxia felt that he was just putting up a strong front. It was very likely that Hoodlum's body had already suffered internal injuries. Yama, I know the purpose of your visit, and it's definitely because of the Sanbai. Although I don't know what you're trying to do with the Sanbai, I don't want to care. Today's battle between you and me can be considered a draw. But in the future, we will naturally have a different victor. After saying that, Hoodlum's figure disappeared from Xianxia's vision. For minutes, 37 seconds, Xianxia silently remembered this number in his heart. This was the time it took for Hoodlum to condense chakra and break free from his attacks. Hoodlum's limit must be around this time. This kind of troublesome ability must be treated seriously. Xianxia felt that he would definitely have a battle with Hoodlum, who belonged to the Akatsuki. After quietly keeping Hoodlum's matter in his heart, Xianxia walked to the table where Hoodlum was sitting. He picked up the scroll and hurriedly skimmed through it. After that, he seemed to have found some useful information and began to carefully read it. Outside the Akatsuki's secret camp, Hoodlum and Zetsu were standing together looking at Xianxia's camp. Zetsu was puzzled as he asked Hoodlum, "Why didn't you deal with this guy? Although it seemed like you didn't have the strength to retaliate, but I know that as long as you're willing to pay a small price, you can definitely kill this alien ninja who cultivates internal energy. This guy, I feel that we will definitely have to face a formidable opponent in the future." Hoodlum glanced at Zetsu, who was standing beside him, and said with a bit of ridicule, No. He still has his own value. Our goal has never been to eliminate dissidents, but to collect tailed beasts to complete our plan. Although Xianxia is indeed troublesome, but if we look at the long term, we will know that there will definitely be some differences between this Xianxia and Windstorm Watergate. Originally, they appear to be united, but are actually divided, and it won't be long before they shed all pretense of cordiality. When the time comes, we just have to use a little bit of our methods, and Windstorm Watergate and Xianxia will definitely have a battle. The battle between the two of them was also a battle between the Bloodclad Pavilion and Konoha. When the time comes, We will just sit back and reap the benefits. Wouldn't it be more worthwhile than fighting to the death?" Finished speaking, Hoodlum directly turned around and didn't look at the dozens of Akatsuki members who had died in the camp. Chapter 348. After reading all the scrolls on the table, Xianxia tried to wander around the tent. Some of the places where Xianxia thought could be used to store confidential documents were also checked by Xianxia one by one, but he still didn't get any valuable information. Tailed beast for the human race, it was really too strange. Even if the human race didn't know how many times these 9-tailed beasts were sealed in Column Force's body, even in the long river of history, there were many people who achieved perfect compatibility with the tailed beasts in their body, but tailed beasts were still a big mystery. Even the tailed beasts themselves couldn't explain clearly why they were born and why they didn't die out. Although Akatsuki organization targeted tailed beasts, but their research was also extremely deep and couldn't form any valuable information. Xianxia indeed had some interesting conjectures in the scrolls, but conjectures were, after all, just conjectures. There was no way to prove it. Dealing with the Sanbai didn't seem to be a simple matter. Xianxia's eyes turned. He hoped that he could think of a way to drive the Sanbai out of here and hide it. In fact, Xianxia could fight with the Sanbai, which was relatively weak among the tailed beasts, and he also had a lot of confidence to kill the Sanbai. But the fact that the tailed beasts were immortal was really meaningless. In here, even if all his hair turned white, it wouldn't have any effect, so it was better to face the tailed beast that he obviously knew a lot about, but never faced. From the scroll, just now, Xianxia already knew the specific location of the Sanbai, so he didn't encounter any obstacles on the way to find Sanbai. Along the way, Xianxia also found a lot of subtle traces of ninja activities, but after some analysis, Xianxia already knew that these ninjas who originally stayed here had already retreated. It seems that when the guy called Hoodlum ran away, he also let the Akatsuki ninjas retreat together with him. After walking for a while, Xianxia had already arrived at the side of the deep lake. Perhaps because the lake was too deep, the lake in front of Xianxia actually had a very deep blue-black color. Standing still, Xianxia directly released his internal energy, and that surging momentum, he used this method to attract the Sanbai that was hidden in the deep lake. Xianxia's method was obviously very effective. The originally calm lake suddenly turned over a layer of white water, and a turtle shell with sharp spikes slowly floated up from the lake. Slowly, this huge creature revealed its full appearance. With a tortoise-like body and 3 long tails, it was obviously Xianxia's target, Sanbai Isabu. When the Sanbai appeared, its eyes were very fierce. After all, it was previously chased around by a human ninja like a dog. Now that he could finally have a good night's sleep, another human came to his doorstep and released his aura so casually, as if he was afraid that he wouldn't notice him. If this wasn't a provocation, then what was? Sanbai stared intently at the sword in Xianxia's hand. Instinctively, Sanbai felt that this thing, which was so small that it would be disdained to be its toothpick, was emitting a very dangerous feeling at this moment. Xianxia naturally noticed the gaze of the Sanbai, but Xianxia knew in his heart that now is not the time to fight with the Sanbai. His purpose is not to kill the Sanbai, but to let it escape from the control of Akatsuki. Together with the scabbard, Xianxia directly inserted his Heaven's Disaster sword into the slightly soft soil next to the deep lake, then shouted to the Sanbai, "Sanbai, I am not your enemy. I didn't come here to fight with you. As a tailed beast, you should be able to understand my words. Now, I put my weapon aside to express my sincerity. I hope that I can have a good talk with you." Sanbai, who has been a Jinchuriki for several generations, naturally understood Xianxia's words. A look of doubt appeared in his eyes at this moment. After all, when humans see a tailed beast, they will either scream and run away or blindly believe in their own strength and directly fight with the tailed beast. But there has never been a person like Xianxia who directly threw his weapon on the ground and wanted to have a talk with the tailed beast. Even Column Force, who is connected to the life of a tailed beast, can't do this, right? In the memory of the Sanbai, there was only one person who was so close to it, Among the tailed beasts, the Sambai itself is the kind of tailed beast with a relatively good character. So at this moment, the Sambai also used a secret method to let its voice appear in Nan Gong's mind. Why should I believe you? You humans are all bad, attacking me for no reason. Every time I want to have a good sleep, someone will disturb me. When I was getting along with Yagura, suddenly a human used the same eyes as the old man's to control me and Yagura. I don't want to believe in humans anymore. A slightly immature voice suddenly appeared in Nan Gong's mind, and the Sambai in front of him also stared at Nan Gong with his big eyes. Obviously, the owner of this voice was the Sambai. He thought that these tailed beasts were a group of old guys, but he didn't expect the Sambai to have such a young voice. Should it be said that people... No, tailed beasts can't be judged by their appearance. The Sambai and Nan Gong didn't have anything to hide, but they mentioned a lot of interesting things. Yagura is the name of a Mizukage of the Mist. It is said that he is the one who can perfectly use the power of the Sambai, column force. So it is natural that he and the Sambai get along well. But there's actually someone who can control the Sambai and Yagura at the same time. Nan Gong doesn't know what kind of Jinjutsu level is needed to achieve this, but such a person must have reached the pinnacle in Jinjutsu. Not to mention these things, Nan Gong also roughly figured out what kind of character the Sambai has through the words of the Sambai. As long as he can appease the Sambai, it is not impossible to take the Sambai away from this place where the Akatsuki is monitoring. Chapter 349. My name is Nan Gong, and I'm currently a wood leaf ninja. I know you're the Sambai, so what's your name? Ignoring the Sambai's childish remarks about humans, Nan Gong pointed to himself and introduced himself to the Sambai, and asked for the Sambai's name. The Sambai was also a little confused by Nan Gong's behavior for a while, but Nan Gong knew very well what he was doing. Since Sambai could communicate with him normally and had the temperament of a teenager or even a child, Nan Gong corrected his attitude and no longer regarded Sambai as a monster. Instead, he treated Sambai as a human teenager. For a creature with self-awareness, the only thing that could make one feel happy was the acknowledgement of others, whether it was one's own abilities or some other characteristics. No matter how strange this person's expression was, the happiness in one's heart could not be concealed. Recognition is the most important pursuit of intelligent creatures. Nan Gong has always felt that if he wants to truly recognize a person, he naturally has to start by knowing each other's names. So he directly introduced himself to the Sambai and asked for the Sambai's name on the way. It turned out that Nan Gong's guess was correct. After Nan Gong asked for the Sambai's name, the Sambai fell into a long silence. The human standing in front of him is somewhat different from the humans he has faced before. Originally, those humans were either full of fear or full of greed for him. But now, the Sambai can't see any bad intentions from the human in front of him. It's like he really just wants to chat with him here. The Sambai vaguely remembers when he was young, the old man pointed at him and gave him the name Isabu. Involuntarily, the Sambai said to Nan Gong, my name is Isabu. Sambai Isabu. Being able to get an answer from the Sambai is enough to prove that his current direction is correct. After Nan Gong secretly cheered for himself in his heart, he tried his best to make his tone and expression gentle enough, then said to the Sambai, Isabu, that's a pretty good name. I didn't come here with any ulterior motives. I came here to help you escape and not be disturbed by those annoying fellows. Are you willing to let me help you? Isabu himself has the temperament of a teenager. In the face of such a person, he doesn't need to say so many dignified words. As long as he treats him sincerely and says what he wants to say, it will be fine. If he insisted on showing off his eloquence and tried to directly crush his will, it would only backfire. But I just want to find a place to sleep. Although those people are a little annoying, they still tiptoe around me every time they approach me. I just have to deliberately ignore them, and I can have a good sleep. Why do I need your help? Isabu himself is a very lazy-tailed beast. As long as he has the chance, it is not impossible for him to stay in a place for hundreds of years. For such a jealous-tailed beast who is unwilling to move, it is better to let those boring people watch him sleep than to be forced to run around. I know, you don't like to change the place you live, but we have to leave here. Do you still remember the person who forced you to come here? He is the leader of a very powerful organization. I know that this organization is secretly planning a plan that is enough to change the whole world, and you and the other 8 tailed beasts are their target. I know that tailed beasts are immortal, but when you die, you still need some time to recover. The feeling of death must not be that good, right? If you continue to stay here, although you can be free for a while, you won't be able to stay for long. I can help you leave here, and then you can choose a place you like to continue living. Nangongzhi was actually trying to guess Sanbai's thoughts, and then began to persuade Sanbai to leave with him. Such a test directly lets Sanbai know the seriousness of the situation. Sanbai may not care about other things, but it has to take seriously the eyes of the Sage of Six Paths, who is the current holder of the Sage of Six Paths. He has the power of the Sage of Six Paths, but he still wants to collect the 9-tailed beasts? Nangongzhi did not know what would happen, but Sanbai still vaguely felt some instinctive danger in his heart. He can't just sit there and wait for death. Otherwise, the final outcome may be worse than the death that Nangongzhi used to provoke Sanbai. What are you going to do? Sanbai was no longer as timid as before, and he still sounded like a young boy. However, he was also much more serious as he asked Nangongzhi. I have 2 plans. Nangongzhi smiled. He is not afraid that Sanbai will doubt him, but he is afraid that Sanbai will not listen to him at all. Since he has already started talking, there is naturally the possibility of continuing the discussion. First of all, I have the spatial coordinates of a different space. If you want, I can extradite you to my space. Without my permission, no one can go to that space. This is the first option I offer you. When Sanbai heard that Nangongzhi has the spatial coordinates of a different space, there was a very obvious surprise in his eyes, but he immediately shook his head to express his refusal. Tailed beasts themselves are the products of the special space of the ninja world. Once they leave the ninja world, tailed beasts are like trees without roots and water without a source. No matter how strong they are, they will become weak. Although Sanbai is close to Nangongzhi, he is not willing to entrust his life to Nangongzhi. Hearing Sanbai's refusal, Nangongzhi did not show any dissatisfaction. After all, they are discussing it, and it is normal to have objections. In addition to the continent, nearly 1/3 of the ninja world is the ocean. Isabu, you're a water-tailed beast. As long as you want, you can naturally live in the deep sea, and there must be food in the ocean. So I think you can also go to the bottom of the sea and find a place to rest. This way, you don't have to be afraid of people with ulterior motives. What do you think? Chapter 350. From Nangongzhi's point of view, the 2 plans he proposed are very effective and pertinent. The Lion Clan space is not only far away from the shinobi world, but he can also prevent others from entering this space through the Lion Clan, and the sea plan will make it more difficult for the Akatsuki to find Sanbai. When Nangongzhi confidently told the Sanbai about his 2 plans, the Sanbai still ruthlessly refused. The reason why he can't leave the shinobi world has already been described in the previous article, and we won't repeat it again. The sea is not as calm as it looks. With the countless years of life experience of the Sanbai, doesn't he know that the sea is more suitable for him? And the sea is also a place where he can live safely. Therefore, the Sanbai actually lived in the sea for a period of time before. But in the shinobi world, there are not only ordinary beasts, but also existences beyond the beast that can refine chakra. Compared to the land, the number and ferocity of the creatures in the sea is more unimaginable. The Sanbai is indeed very strong as a bijou, but how can he not know that a group of ants can devour an elephant? I thank you for thinking so much for me, and I can also feel that you really think of a way out for me. But I've never been free. My existence has a mission. Death was scary, but what made me even more upset was that I had to give up my mission because of fear. You don't need to take me out of the shinobi world, nor do you need to cover me to the sea. You just need to find me a place where I can stay. The The Sambai's voice still sounded so young, but it contained the vicissitudes of life accumulated over many years. After taking a deep look at Nangongja, the Sambai still seemed to be a little reluctant and said to Nangongja, "You just said that you have a different space. This is very good. The shinobi world is in chaos, and a different space may be a good shelter. You should take your family to hide in a different space as soon as possible to avoid the disaster." Halfway through its sentence, the voice that was supposed to appear in Nangongja's mind suddenly stopped when it was about to say something. At this moment, the Sambai seemed to have suffered a huge injury. It roared loudly at the sky, and its huge body seemed to be rolling around in the pool due to the pain, bringing up huge waves. Nangongja was puzzled by the Three Tails words. Nangongja did not understand the so-called calamity. However, Nangongja could still understand the current situation. It must have been because some tyrannical existence noticed that Sambai had said something that it shouldn't have. Hence, it used some means to prevent Sambai from continuing to speak to him and punished it. Nangongja tentatively released a little bit of his mental power to the three-tailed beast, hoping to figure out what kind of existence could bully a tailed beast like the three-tailed beast like a stray dog. When a wisp of mental strength was about to reach the three-tail's forehead, an irresistible force directly erased Nangongja's mental strength. Nangongja also looked very pale at the moment because his mental strength was forcibly erased. What kind of power is this? Nangongja secretly asked himself in his heart, but there was no way to get any answer. Nangongja had encountered many powerful people and fought many of them. However, this was the first time that Nangongja felt that he could not win. Even if he used all his means, even if he did not care about the cost, there was no way he could hurt such an existence. And this existence seemed to be able to erase his existence as long as it was unhappy with him. In front of such an existence, Nangongja was like an ant. Such an existence did not belong to this world at all. This was the only definition that Nangongja could give to such an existence. The Three Tails' punishment seemed to have ended. The Three Tails, which was still rolling in pain in the pool, had calmed down at this moment. At the same time, Nangongja slowly recovered from the dizziness caused by the destruction of his mental strength. The Three Tails, which was talking a lot with Nangongja, did not say a word at this moment. It took a deep look at Nangongja, who was standing on the shore of the pool, then turned around and dived into the pool. After the Three Tails dived into the pool, mud waves kept churning from bottom to top. Did that existence give the Three Tails a warning not to have too much contact with me and not to tell me more? Nangongja could only find such a barely justifiable reason for the Three Tails' behavior. Although he was still very unhappy, he could only end it like this. The Three Tails, the unknown powerful existence, the crisis that swept the ninja world, the controlled Yagura, and the Three Tails. Nangongja was only going to disrupt the Akatsuki's plan and vent his anger for a little longer, but he didn't expect to come into contact with so many secrets all of a sudden. Gradually, Nangongja found that he was a little confused about this world. Originally, Nangongja thought that he had experienced a lot of things in the ninja world and knew a lot of secrets. But now it seems that the water of the ninja world is much deeper than he thought. Then, with his current strength, could he really protect his family? Or do I have to do what the Three Tails said? Once again, for the safety of my family, I have to run into the Lion Clan space and let my family stay there for 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years. Previously, because of his lack of strength, in order to protect his family, Nangongja let the 3 girls stay in the Lion Clan space. After so many years, was he still going to bring his family to live in a cold and empty place like the Lion Clan's alternate space without making any progress? At this moment, Nangongja could only feel an unusual irritation in his heart. The feeling of powerlessness was so strong. Looking at the Heaven's Retribution sword that was inserted in the ground by him, Nangongja slowly walked to its side, grabbed the scabbard, and took the Heaven's Retribution sword in his hand. Although the matter of the Three Tails can't be said to be perfectly solved, it can be said that the Akatsuki didn't get what they wanted. And There is one thing that Nangong has always been a little bit concerned about, so he decided to return home as soon as possible to solve the doubts in his heart. The water of the deep pool finally returned to its original blue-black color, and the sediment was deposited under the action of time, and everything seems to have returned to normal. No one knew that so many people had died here, and no one knew that an interracial dialogue had taken place here. No one knew that there was an irresistible expert who had once descended his will here. The pool water rippled under the blowing of the wind, and the storm of the ninja world seems to be about to begin. Chapter 351. Unlike before, when he was in a hurry to stop the Akatsuki's captivity plan, Nangong's speed of returning to the wood leaf could be considered as slow and leisurely. This journey took about a week. Including the time spent on the way up, Nangong had personally been rushing about for nearly half a month. Rushing about, this was not only a word that Nangong was most familiar with, it was also a word that Little Linger, Mishiro, and Nangong were all familiar with. This was because Nangong had practically turned rushing about into a way of life for the few of them to live a stable life. Moreover, this kind of life Nangong himself was also very happy, because this kind of rushing about was really effective, wasn't it? But because this time Nangong went out, no one knew what exactly Nangong was going to do, and also didn't know when exactly Nangong would return. Therefore, the three girls didn't wait for Nangong to return like before. After taking off his shoes and neatly placing them at the door, Nangong hung his coat on the hanger and walked to the living room to pour a cup of water and sat down. When Nangong returned home, it was already 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. The originally pitch-black sky was slowly illuminated by the brilliance of the sun, but because the sun hadn't completely revealed its appearance, the sky still looked somewhat gloomy. Just when Nangong thought that the three girls at home should be immersed in their dreams. So he sat alone in the living room to rest for a while and show off his cooking skills. Nangong walked out wearing a somewhat light nightgown. Different from the average female, Nangong figure was very tall. Even Mishiro was slightly shorter than Nangong. Moreover, Nangong figure was relatively slender. When she walked out wearing a white floral nightgown, her sparkling and translucent skin seemed to become somewhat translucent under the blurry morning sunlight. Her hair was a bit messy because of sleep, and her face looked a bit dazed because of sleepiness. However, in Nangong's eyes, his sister was showing a different kind of charm at this moment. The current Nangong was no longer the Nangong who kept a certain distance from him in the past few years, and worked hard to become gentle and virtuous. Instead, it was like a long time ago when the two of them depended on each other, the cute sister who acted wantonly to act coquettishly towards him. "Ruru, I'm back." At this moment, Nangong's mind was still not clear because she had just woken up. For a moment, she actually didn't notice that Nangong was already sitting in the living room. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and skillfully opened the refrigerator to take out a bottle of tea, seemingly preparing to pour it out to drink. In order to remind his sister a little, Nangong opened his mouth to greet Nangong. After a moment of silence, Nangong's eyes stared in the direction of Nangong for a while. Then, as if she suddenly realized her current situation, her eyes directly opened from the originally confused look directly from her original appearance. "Brother, you're back?" Nangong nodded and said to Nangong, "Yeah, I just came back. When I saw that you were still sleepy, I wanted to wake you up and remind you not to trip and fall." When Nangong heard Nangong's words, she looked at her own clothes and her little face immediately flushed red. One had to know that her nightgown was very thin. Thin meant transparent, right? Moreover, she didn't like to wear certain indescribable things to sleep. Now that she looked at herself, she felt that she could clearly see the situation inside. Just when Nangong saw that his sister's face suddenly flushed red in confusion, he thought that she had caught a cold and was about to go over to check her temperature. However, just then, Mishiro walked out of his room. At the same time, he saw Nangong and Nangong looking at each other, then looking at each other awkwardly. Unlike Nangong, Mashiro could tell at a glance why Nangong Ro was blushing. Hence, he walked over to the place where the clothes and hats were hung and took a shawl to drape over Nangong Ro's shoulders, blocking the view under Nangong Ro's nightgown. Seeing Mashiro's actions, Nangongja also calmed down and understood why his sister's expression was so strange. That's right, his sister was only a little younger than him. Now that she was a big girl, she naturally had the thought of the difference between a man and a woman. As he thought about it, for some reason, Nangongja felt very uncomfortable in his heart. It was as if the sister who had accompanied him for his entire life was about to run away with another man. The frustration in his heart made Nangongja want to take out his calamity sword and chop all his future brothers-in-law to death. In the past, Yichue always joked with Nangongja, saying that Nangongja was a Siscon. Although no one had said that in all these years, it seemed that Nangongja's Siscon had not only not weakened, but it seemed to have strengthened by a lot. Sister Rower, you should go back and sleep for a while. Seeing that you haven't slept enough, I'll wake you up after breakfast is done, okay? Mashiro wrapped the shawl around Nangong Ro's shoulders tightly, then said to Nangong Ro in a very gentle manner. Compared to Nangong Ro's gentleness, Mashiro's gentleness was simply astonishing, and it was incomparably compatible with her. Even refined steel would be melted by Mashiro's gentleness, right? Nangong Ro looked at Mashiro, standing in front of her, and for a moment, she became silent. Sure enough, there's still no way to compete. Quietly, no one knew that Nangong Ro had already made such a judgment for herself. Nangong Ro silently walked back to her bedroom. Accompanied by Nangong's confused gaze and Mashiro's even more complicated expression, Nangong Ro closed her door. After adjusting her mentality, Mashiro once again put on a smile on her face, then turned to Nangongja and said, "Since it's rare for you to wake up so early, why don't you help me make breakfast for Sister Rower and Little Inger?" Mashiro's suggestion was what Nangongja was prepared to do previously. Naturally, Nangongja had nothing to say, but instead, he took on the responsibility for Mashiro. "It's rare for me to make a meal. Why don't you help me this time? Although I feel that my cooking might not be as good as yours, it's still a token of my goodwill after being away for half a month. Token of your goodwill." When Mashiro heard this word, she couldn't help but look at Nangong Ro's room. Chapter 352. After returning home in the morning, Nangong Ro and Nangongja did not speak much for the whole day. In fact, in the past few years, Nangong Ro was not as attached to her brother as she was when she was young. Nangongja thought he knew what was going on. After all, girls gradually grew up and understood the difference between men and women. It was understandable that they would keep a certain distance from each other. However, Nangongja felt that something was very wrong. The feeling that he had done something wrong lingered in Nangongja's heart for a long time. Could it be that he was wrong? When Nangongja began to have such a thought, the suspicion towards himself could not be stopped. The light of the sun gradually began to fade under the cover of the mountain peak. The bright moon seemed to be holding back its strength to release its brilliance. It was already nighttime, but the moonlight tonight was exceptionally bright. In the courtyard of Nangongja's house, there were a few small paths paved with terrazzo stones. Under the illumination of the moonlight, the small courtyard was very bright. Nangongja saw that the moonlight tonight was just right, so he directly sat cross-legged on the eaves. He casually placed his green jade gourd and a small wine cup that he found at home beside him. Obviously, he was going to sit there and drink. Nangong Ro looked at Nangongja, who was sitting alone outside. She turned back to look at Mashiro, who seemed to be cleaning up the dishes in the kitchen. Her eyes could not help but have a little doubt. If it was any other time, when Mashiro saw Nangongja sitting outside wanting to drink, no matter what kind of work he was doing, he would definitely be very gentle like a good wife and mother, pouring wine for Nangongja. This time, Mashiro did not react at all, which made Nangong Ro feel a little strange. But then, Nangong Ro's eyes rolled around, as if she thought of something. Therefore, Nangong Ro gently opened the door between the living room and the eaves, and very respectfully sat beside Nangongja. After sitting down, Nangong Ro even tidied up her clothes properly to make sure that her sitting posture was meticulous enough. Obviously, she was very concerned about her image at this moment. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with her posture, she reached out her hand and took Nangong's green jade gourd in her hand. This green jade gourd contained Nangong's favorite wine, so Nangongja usually treasured it and almost no one would touch it. When Nangong Ro picked her brother's favorite wine gourd, Nangong Ro, the green jade gourd, with a cold and warm texture from her palm to her head. TSK. Although Nangong Ro was very careful and hoped that she could lower the sound of pouring wine, it was already night and the surrounding environment was relatively quiet, so the sound of pouring wine was still so clear. She placed the wine glass on the floor of the eaves, stretched out 2 fingers, and gently pushed the wine glass to Nangong's hand. Nangong Ro once again returned to her previous awkward but incomparably strict sitting posture. It was hard to imagine how Mashiro's sister learned to sit like this for the whole day. It was really uncomfortable. Ro. Nangongja naturally knew that his sister was pouring wine for him, so he called out his undying name. When Nangong Ro heard Nangongja call her name, her body obviously trembled. Brother, is there a problem? To be honest, this was the first time Nangong Ro poured wine for Nangongja. Therefore, Nangong Ro was also very nervous in her heart. She was afraid that she would do something wrong and make her brother unhappy. Nangong Ro was also very angry in her heart. Usually, when she saw Mashiro's sister pouring wine for her brother, she was so elegant and natural, but why did she become so stiff and uncoordinated when it came to herself? Maybe her brother was a little unhappy because of this. Am I going to be replaced by Mashiro's sister by my brother? She didn't know why, but this was the first thought that appeared in Nangong Ro's mind. For the little girl, it seemed that she might be replaced by Mashiro more than being scolded by her brother. Nangongja turned his head to look at his sister. Naturally, he noticed her extremely unnatural expression and said to his sister with some doubts, "Why do you have such an expression? You look like I'm bullying you." "You?" Nangong Ro softly muttered, "You've always been bullying me." Although she was muttering, Nangongja's hearing was still able to hear what his sister was saying. He reached out his hand and quietly placed a strand of loose hair back on his sister's ear. He said to his sister very gently, "Oh, how should I explain this? You're my sister. I can't wait to dote on you. How can I bully you?" Hearing her brother's question, Nangong Ro didn't know what to say for a moment. Her eyes were a little embarrassed. Her eyes drifted left and right as if she was struggling with something. Finally, she opened her cherry lips and bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth. She seemed to have made up her mind and said to Nangongja, "Brother, are you and Mashiro's sister?" Nangong Ro only said half of her words, as if she hoped that her brother could understand her meaning. Mashiro? Hearing his sister's words, Nangongja was a little confused. He didn't seem to understand his sister's meaning and said to Nangong Ro, "Why are you suddenly talking about your Mashiro's sister?" Nangong Ro looked at her brother with a face full of resentment. Finally, she gathered her courage and held Nangongja's hand. She used her fingers to gently rub the calluses on Nangongja's palm and thumb due to years of sword practice. She looked into Nangongja's eyes and said very seriously, "Brother, I understand you, just like how you understand me." You know what I mean by that? As expected, your Mashiro's sister and I are family, just like you're my family. I know that you have your own worries in your heart, but some things are destined to be solved by yourself. No matter what happens, you will always be my most beloved sister. Just like when I first came to Woodleaf, everything I do is to protect my family. Nangongja and Nangong Ro weren't blood-related. This was something that both of them were very clear about. But because they weren't blood-related, Nangong Ro, who was still a young girl, naturally thought more about it. The two of them didn't ask the question they wanted to ask, nor did they get the answer they wanted to know. Nangongja reached out and grabbed the wine cup beside him. He raised his head and poured the drunken immortal wine into his mouth. It was clearly his favorite wine, but Nangongja didn't have the mood to savor it all. Chapter 353. People will always grow, and some of the feelings that were originally ignored will slowly start to grow in their hearts. Just like Nangongzhi Nangongro, who was sitting next to Nangongro when she was young, she enjoyed her brother's hard work for her. Even though the days were so difficult for Nangongro, it was her most cherished time. But as time passed, Nangongzhi, who she and her grandfather had high hopes for, did indeed show his brilliance and let the whole ninja world give him the title of Yama. Originally, Nangongro thought that she would still be happy for her brother's achievements like before. But things didn't go as she wished. Nangongro didn't know why there were a lot of feelings in her heart that she didn't have before. And these complicated emotions became stronger after the appearance of Mashiro. In the beginning, Mashiro was still very immature and blank. Whether it was for life or for herself, she didn't have any understanding of herself. But slowly, Mashiro changed little by little. Mashiro, who was originally a little natural, began to slowly learn how to cook, wash, and take care of a family. Nangongro was also one of the beneficiaries of this change, but in her heart, she was very unwilling to accept such care. So, Nangongro also forced herself to change. Nangongro, who was so lively and active, changed, became more gentle, became more caring, and became like another Mashiro. But the more she changed, the more confused Nangongro's heart became. Because Nangongro found that no matter how she changed, there was no way she could be as careful and gentle as Mashiro. Mashiro was like the incarnation of the word gentle. Every day, he was as gentle as water, taking care of Nangongzhi, taking care of Nangongro, and taking care of little Linger, who was like the original Nangongro. What kind of feeling was that? If a name had to be given, perhaps only a word like sense of crisis would be appropriate, right? When Nangongzhi said that she would always be his family, Nangongro didn't know why, but her heart was filled with an inexplicable resistance. It seemed that she didn't want to be Nangongzhi's family. Nangongro had something more that she longed for. But these were words that Nangongro couldn't say, and Nangongro didn't dare to say it. Nangongro's hand, that was holding the green jade, gourd tightened. The originally cool and gentle feeling of the green jade gourd made her feel as if she was holding a piece of ice that would never melt. The coldness invaded her palm, attacked Nangongro's blood vessels, and eroded Nangongro's heart. Silence. Nangongro could only remain silent. Everything passed in silence. Nangongzhi drank the wine that his sister poured for him, and Nangongro poured wine for Nangongzhi again and again in a somewhat mechanical manner. Finally, Nangongzhi seemed to feel that it was enough, so he gently covered his wine cup with his hand. Obviously, he didn't want his sister to continue pouring wine for him. Nangongro immediately understood. She plugged the green jade gourd stopper back and turned around to walk back into the house. Nangongzhi stood on the eaves, enjoying the cold night breeze. Mashiro also slowly walked to Nangongzhi's side. You heard everything? Nangongzhi knew that Mashiro had come to his side, so he asked Mashiro. Nangongzhi's voice sounded a little weak, and it was unknown whether it was because of the wine or because of his emotions. It was as if he had no energy at all. Actually, I know myself very well. I'm a complete idiot when it comes to matters of the heart. I don't understand why my sister and I have become like this. It puzzles me and makes me blame myself. She's my sister, but I didn't fulfill my responsibility to take good care of her. It's not that you don't understand. Mashiro didn't sit respectfully beside Nangongzhi like before. Instead, he leaned lazily against the eaves and sat opposite Nangongzhi. Actually, you know what Nangongro is thinking about, what I'm thinking about, and even what little Linger is thinking about. But you chose not to understand. Because if you understand, you have to face it. If you understand, you have to accept change. But you don't like change the most. It can even be said that you're the most afraid of change. You only hope that your life can be as you imagine it to be, unchanging and peaceful. So you chose to escape. Even Rower, little Linger, and I have to escape with you. This isn't a big deal. Who doesn't want to escape from something? Even if you're called Yama, a role that's close to being the judge of life, you're still an ordinary person in this world. Your pressure and your sense of responsibility have already exhausted you. So, escaping isn't shameful. It's even somewhat effective. But some things have to be faced in the end. So, although I don't hate you for escaping, it's best that you don't escape for too long. After saying this, Mishiro also left. Nangongja knew that Mishiro was telling the truth. Did he really not see through it? Did he really not understand it at all? Emotions were a very important difference between humans and animals. Because of their desire to survive and reproduce, animals begin to act on their own. On the other hand, humans wrap their bestial nature with a layer of chains called emotions, which made them different from animals. But weren't emotions also a weapon that hurt humans? Nangongja was afraid. As a person who had been injured countless times on the battlefield and had been on the brink of death countless times, he was very afraid at this moment. Nangongja didn't want to face it because once he did, there was a possibility that he would be injured. Nangongja didn't want to participate in such a gamble. But Mishiro was right. The path of escape would eventually lead to the end. He had to face it eventually. As he thought about it, Nangongja's heart became particularly irritable. Nangongja, who had been restraining himself from drinking, took out his green jade gourd again. This time, he didn't use a wine cup. Instead, he poured it directly into his mouth. Nangongja didn't know how much of the precious drunken immortal wine was wasted because of his rough actions. However, Nangongja didn't feel any heartache or regret. Instead, he continued to drink the wine in his mouth. Chapter 354. Not to mention how complicated Nangongja's mood was at home. At this moment, Woodleaf was more lively than usual, and the reason was the statement issued by the Hokage's office to the village during the day. At this moment, Woodleaf was actually a bit unstable. After all, the 3 generations of Hokage, who ruled Woodleaf for many years, had just passed away, and the roots of Woodleaf, which can be said to be deeply rooted and powerful, were jointly destroyed by Watergate and Nangongja. Although everyone didn't say anything on the surface, they inevitably had some worries in their hearts. With such a consumption of strength, can Woodleaf Village still occupy the position of the top 5 shinobi villages in the shinobi world? Watergate himself is very good at understanding other people's thoughts, or very good at guessing people's minds. He is also very clear about the current situation in the village. So Watergate has already asked his master, one of the Sannin, to go outside the village to find the princess of the Senju clan, Woodleaf Tsunadeheim, Tsunade. Tsunade herself is a very important symbol in the noble forces of Woodleaf, and her medical ninjutsu is the best in the shinobi world. If such a person can return to Woodleaf after more than 10 years, whether it's the ordinary members of Woodleaf or the various families, it's a shot in the arm. And just today, Watergate has received a notice from his master. Tsunade's problem has been solved. Although there are a few twists and turns, Watergate has persuaded Tsunade to return to Woodleaf again. And Minato also directly notified all his subordinates and immediately announced such a news within the village and even the shinobi world, which can be regarded as a warning to the unstable hearts of the people and the enemies in the shinobi world. Many of Konoha's people have fought under Tsunade's command. Even Nangongja has served under Tsunade for a while. As a female ninja, Tsunade has a unique charm, and many people are convinced by Tsunade. That kind of heroic spirit, even many men can't compare to it, right? The time when Tsunade officially returned to the village was about 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. Woodleaf's ninjas and civilians have gathered at the village gate at this moment, and it seems that they have been waiting for a long time. Even Watergate, who hasn't been wearing Hokage's hat for a long time, stood in a white tent with a red flame pattern on it, waiting for Tsunade's arrival. On the road outside Woodleaf's gate, Tsunade and Jiraiya walked slowly on the road, step by step. But Jiraiya, who is usually so talkative, was unusually silent at this moment. As the two continued to move, hidden in the forest, gradually, and Tsunade's face was hidden in the forest. The tall shadow rock engraved with 4 Hokage heads appeared in front of Tsunade's eyes, and her originally slow pace directly stopped at this moment. on the Shadow Rock. Two of them were Tsunade's grandfathers, and one was Tsunade-sensei. Suddenly seeing the faces of these three people who were so familiar with her, but who have also left the world, appear in front of her, even Tsunade, who didn't care about life and death, had mixed feelings at this moment. A pair of slightly red eyes appeared on his face, which looked very young because he had cultivated a secret technique. I'm back, but everything seems to have changed. Whether it's the broken tree or the rope tree, whether it's my grandfathers or sensei, they're all gone at this moment. Is this wood leaf really the place I used to call home? Tsunade has begun to ask herself such a question silently in her heart, but she has no idea what kind of answer she will get, or there is no so-called answer to such a question. Seeing Tsunade stop, Jiraiya's Adam's apple rolled a few times on his neck. He seemed to think for a while and finally said, "Tsunade, let's go. Watergate is still waiting for us in the village." Tsunade looked back at Jiraiya, who was looking at her, and her eyes almost made Jiraiya want to take Tsunade and leave here directly. The situation of the village, the situation of Watergate, Jiraiya all wanted to leave these behind. Jiraiya really didn't want to see the woman he loved for a lifetime have to face those things that hurt her. But such an impulse was instantly suppressed by Jiraiya from his heart, because perhaps for people like Jiraiya, what Leaf's matter is beyond his personal feelings. If there is a conflict between Wood Leaf and his feelings, Jiraiya can only choose the side that benefits Wood Leaf. Perhaps this is the reason why Tsunade chose to break the tree instead of someone who obviously knows better. Let's go. For some reason, Jiraiya always felt that he seemed to see a touch of disappointment in Tsunade's eyes, but when he looked carefully, it disappeared. Tsunade also knew that her current appearance with red eyes was not suitable to appear in front of others, so she used chakra to touch her eyes. The original obvious redness and swelling disappeared in an instant. Tsunade, who looked very lovable just now, has become high-spirited at this moment. Even Jiraiya, who followed Tsunade, felt very envious of her spirit. Sure enough, women, especially strong women like Tsunade, are the kind of people who are very good at hiding their hearts. Slightly sighing in his heart, Jiraiya followed Tsunade's footsteps and walked towards the gate that was not so far away from them. At this moment, all the gates were opened, and residents of Wood Leaf stood on the side of the main road. Among these residents, there were also many ninjas, and their eyes were naturally very good. After faintly seeing the figures of Jiraiya and Tsunade, the people waiting at the gate immediately became excited. These two are strong people who led Wood Leaf to victory in the Third Shinobi World War. Every resident of Wood Leaf has a natural worship for the strong, so when Jiraiya and Tsunade appeared in front of everyone, everyone became restless. The shadow guards who followed Watergate here were also sent by Watergate to maintain the order at the scene so that the excited people would not do anything bad. Watergate also tidied up his clothes, wearing his white haori, and slowly walked towards the gate. Chapter 355. Taking a few quick steps, Watergate walked towards Jiraiya and Tsunade, who were walking towards him. Holding Tsunade's hand very kindly, Watergate said to Tsunade with some relief and excitement, "Welcome back." Watergate's face still had the signature hearty smile, but Tsunade felt that Watergate had changed from before. On the contrary, it made Tsunade feel that Watergate seemed to faintly see the style of the 3 generations Hokage, who was called Ninja Hero when he was young. Sure enough, does being Hokage really change a person? Watergate, who was innocent and cute, and sometimes even blushed because of her malicious teasing, has also changed, although it was a little difficult to accept in her heart. After all, it was in public. Watergate, as the Hokage of Wood Leaf, can treat her like this. Tsunade still has to express something. So she also showed a smile on her face and said to Watergate, "Thank you for Hokage-sama's reception. I'm back." After listening to Tsunade's words, Watergate seemed to be a little unhappy and said to Tsunade, "Tsunade-sama is wrong. You and my sensei are in the same team of ninja, so you're my elder. Even if I'm Hokage, I'm still Minato Watergate. no matter how much respect I have for you. You're not only a powerful ninja, but also a hero of Wood Leaf. I naturally should give you the treatment you deserve." These words sounded really bureaucratic, but no one could find fault with it. Standing behind Tsunade, Jiraiya looked at his disciple, who was fully showing his personal charm as Hokage and Minato Watergate at this moment, and for a while, he was somewhat at a loss. Jiraiya was actually a little repulsed by such things, but these things were also indispensable, and Jiraiya naturally had no position to say anything. Everything was so jubilant, and everyone seemed to be immersed in the lively atmosphere of the return of Wood Leaf's powerhouse. Yabuki, who liked the lively atmosphere, naturally took her daughter, who was on vacation at home, to see the ceremony of the most famous female ninja in Wood Leaf history returning to Wood Leaf. After such a ceremony, Yabuki also took her daughter Sakura to visit Nangong's home after a long time. For Yabuki, whether it was Nangongja, Nangong-ro, Little Linger, or Mashiro, they were all very welcome. The mother and daughter were welcomed into the house and warmly received. Yabuki naturally also told Nangongja about Tsunade's return. After listening to these words, Nangongja couldn't help but sigh. "When I first became a ninja and stepped into the battlefield of World War III, I first served Tsunade-sama and White Fan-sama. It was also at that time that I received a lot of care from Tsunade-sama and White Fan-sama. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be who I am now," Nangongja said, with some nostalgia in his eyes. Seeing Sakura sitting quietly next to Yabuki, Nangongja also seemed to suddenly think of something and continued. "In fact, Sakura and Tsunade-sama also have this fate. During the Chunin exam, in order to let Sakura quickly develop combat power, I also taught Sakura a method called one-inch punch. In fact, to a large extent, this method of exerting power is also because I followed Tsunade-sama back then and saw Tsunade-sama exert monstrous strength several times. Sakura and Tsunade-sama are also somewhat similar, whether it is the control of chakra or the way of fighting, they have similar parts. In Sakura's heart, Nangongja himself is a rare strong man in the world. Now that Nangongja actually began to praise a female ninja so much, naturally, Sakura was a little surprised. "Nangong-san, is this Tsunade-sama so powerful? Obviously, she doesn't look very old, but she is called a Sannin like the old white-haired uncle behind her. Is Sannin actually the same name as Hokage?" Sakura asked her question without hesitation. Sure enough, girls care more about a person's appearance. Although aware that what she said was a little rude, Sakura didn't intend to apologize at all. Instead, she seemed to be ready to get to the bottom of this matter. "I don't know very well, but Tsunade-sama is indeed of the same generation as Jiraiya-sama. It seems that he has cultivated some kind of secret technique that allows him to keep his appearance unchanged." Eternal youth? Nangongja's words directly made all the girls in the house light up, just like a pervert who saw beauty. Their eyes glowed with lust. As long as it's a woman, there is no one who doesn't care about their appearance. When they heard that a secret technique that can make them eternal youth really exists, no one wouldn't be tempted. Naturally, Sakura also thought of Tsunade's soft face and impressive figure that she saw at the gate just now. If only she could do the same. "Nangong-san, I want to worship Tsunade-sama as my teacher." After an almost negligible amount of time of inner struggle, Sakura finally said such a sentence to Nangongja. "Indeed, I also think that if I let you practice under Tsunade-sama, you will make great progress, but I haven't said anything yet. Why do you already have such a plan?" Nangongja obviously still didn't understand how great the temptation of eternal youth is for women. "Nangong-san, you also said that Tsunade-sama and I are very similar to each other. So naturally, I hope that I can stay young. Oh no, I want to be stronger. So, please introduce me to Tsunade-sama. No matter what the test is, I am willing to accept it." Although Sakura accidentally revealed her purpose, her eyes were very firm. Obviously, she wanted to become Tsunade's disciple. Nangongja also felt that this was a good choice, so he could only nod and say to Sakura, "I will try to convey your request to Tsunade-sama. But now that Tsunade-sama has just returned to the village, there will be a lot of people who will bother her during this time. After a while, I will go to Tsunade-sama and ask her to accept you as her disciple. Sakura, I watch you grow up. Uncle Nangong naturally hopes that you can have a better future and become stronger. I just hope that this face will be of some use, right? After all, although Tsunade-sama looks very heroic, in fact, she is somewhat inexplicably capricious. Chapter 356. After the grand welcoming ceremony at the Wood Leaf Gate, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Watergate finally left the crowd and came to the Hokage office building to meet with the representatives of the Elder Group, Xianxia and Mito Menitis. Unlike the welcoming ceremony at the gate of the Wood Leaf clan, this was the real welcoming ceremony for Tsunade's return to the Wood Leaf clan. Although Xianxia and Mito Menitis didn't have a close relationship with Tsunade, as representatives of the Wood Leaf clan, they were naturally closer to Tsunade, who was a direct descendant of the Senju clan. When the five of them got together, some meaningless greetings were inevitable. Xianxia and Mito Menitis were very talkative people themselves. Watergate also improved under various activities as Hokage over the years. Tsunade, as a direct descendant of the Senju clan, was naturally very good at social speech. Although Jiraiya didn't like to communicate with people so much, he was also very good at it. The five of them exchanged pleasantries for nearly 20 minutes, but all of them seemed to be in high spirits. After all, Jiraiya's background was relatively low, and he didn't like this kind of environment, so he took the lead and said to Watergate, "We'll have time to talk later, but Tsunade has just returned to the village. She must be very tired, even if she doesn't have to travel all the way. Why don't we give Tsunade's resignation as soon as possible, and then let Tsunade go back and rest early?" Watergate was naturally the closest to Jiraiya, and he knew that his master didn't like this scene so much, so he nodded and said to Mito Menitis, Xianxia, and Tsunade, "What Jiraiya-sensei said also makes sense. Anyway, Tsunade-sama has returned. We don't have to rush. Why don't we take a seat?" Watergate's hand made a palm gesture and invited them to take a seat. As the Hokage, naturally no one would disrespect Watergate, so they all pulled out the chair next to them and sat down in the conference room. In the moment, Jiraiya, who proposed to directly start the formal meeting, sat down on the chair. The relaxed look on his face was reflected in everyone's eyes. Although Jiraiya didn't sit on the chair in a very relaxed manner, he was still a little loose. Tsunade, who was sitting next to him, glanced at Jiraiya. Seeing Jiraiya's loose posture, she was not used to it. He stretched out a hand and gently patted Jiraiya's thigh, reminding him not to sit so loosely. But when Jiraiya saw Tsunade's hand reaching out to his leg and patting him gently, he didn't understand Tsunade's intention at all. Instead, he had a wretched look on his face. He even wiped his eyes on the corner of his clothes and looked at Tsunade's soft hand that was about to hold it. Although Tsunade was famous for her medical ninjutsu, her hot temper and terrifying monstrous strength weren't just for show. Originally, Tsunade wanted to remind Jiraiya because his posture was a bit indecent, but she didn't expect that Jiraiya, the intimate paradise, was really not thinking about serious things. He didn't know what Jiraiya was imagining in his mind, but his slightly widened nostrils, narrowed pupils, and rapid breathing really made people feel that the word wretched existed for guys like Jiraiya. "You bastard, enough is enough." Just when Jiraiya's hand was about to hold Tsunade's hand, Tsunade finally couldn't continue to hide in front of Mito Menitis, Xianxia, and Watergate. Chakra directly broke out, and chakra condensed on Tsunade's fist. Blue veins stood out on her temple and neck. Obviously, Tsunade also endured a lot. Tsunade, it's my fault. Don't. At this moment, Jiraiya finally remembered the horror of being dominated by Tsunade's iron fist. Jiraiya, who had always boasted of being romantic and not obscene, was now blasted out of the wall and turned into a star flying in the sky. The scream in his mouth was like the sound of the friction between the sky and the air. It unexpectedly had a different kind of beauty. She just didn't know how many bones in Jiraiya's body would be broken after he landed, and where would he need a rest. Watergate, Xianxia, and Mito could only watch Jiraiya die and Tsunade explode without saying a word. Nonsense. Who would dare to stand up at this time? Who wouldn't dare to fight with Tsunade's temper? And Tsunade's monstrous fist was so easy to endure. Even a powerful ninja like Jiraiya would sometimes break a few of his ribs after being punched by Tsunade. He had to recuperate. Let's get down to business. Watergate glanced at the huge hole in the wall of the conference room, and he was a little distressed. He had to pay for it again. Hearing Minato's words, Yuditane Koharu and Mito Kadohamura also hurriedly agreed. They couldn't let Tsunade sulk like this. If she couldn't figure it out and left the village in anger, what would they do? Leaf wouldn't be able to survive in the ninja world anymore. Xianxia looked at Watergate, Mito and Tsunade sitting next to him, took out a letter of appointment from his arms, handed it to Tsunade, and said at the same time, after the discussion between the elders of Kiba and Leaf Hokage, we decided to restore one of the Leaf Sannin, the daughter of the Senju clan, Tsunade, as the director of Kiba Hospital and the commander-in-chief of the Leaf Medical Force. Since it's peacetime, the medical force has no combat mission for the time being. Instead, it has assumed the responsibility of training medical ninjas. As the innovator of the three-person team system, we decided to let Tsunade be responsible for training new medical ninjas of Leaf. Tsunade, I don't know if you are willing to accept. Tsunade glanced at Watergate sitting next to her with a little surprise, and Watergate also smiled very gently at Tsunade. You know, Tsunade also proposed a plan to vigorously train medical ninjas, but it has never been passed. She didn't expect to have such a training plan as soon as she returned to Leaf today. And according to Xiaochun's words, it's not difficult to infer that her authority has been greatly delegated. It can be said that she can train medical ninjas according to her wishes. This was unimaginable in the past. It seems that Watergate must have contributed to such a plan, right? Chapter 357. In the Hokage office building, Watergate, Tsunade, Xiaochun, and Mito were discussing Tsunade's future responsibilities and obligations. Jiraiya, who had just been punched into a meteor in the sky by Tsunade, had used his various means to land safely on the ground. In fact, the reason why Jiraiya acted like that just now was largely because he didn't want to be in the same room with the four people just now. In Jiraiya's opinion, if Tsunade was still wandering in the shinobi world, she would be much happier than in Leaf. Leaf has too many hidden secrets and heartbreaking tragedies. Even Jiraiya would leave Leaf for the shinobi world if he had nothing to do. Although Jiraiya has always boasted that he collected important information while collecting materials, Leaf's Umbu and intelligence collection personnel are not as good as Jiraiya. In fact, Jiraiya didn't want to stay in Leaf for too long. Jiraiya does love Leaf deeply, and he is willing to pay any price for Leaf, but it doesn't mean that Jiraiya likes those high-ranking decision-makers who stand at the top of Leaf. As a ninja from a grassroots background, no one knows better than Jiraiya the face of these decision-makers and what they do. Wandering aimlessly on the street from time to time, he put his hand on his chest where Tsunade's punch just hit. With a slightly bitter face, he slowly rubbed it, hoping to relieve some of the pain. His eyes wandered around. In fact, Jiraiya hasn't wandered on the streets of Leaf for a long time. Usually, when he was in Leaf, he would either peep, oh no, go to the women's bathhouse to collect materials, or help Watergate deal with all kinds of troublesome matters. It's been a long time since he could wander on the street with nothing to do. While walking, Jiraiya suddenly saw a shop sign. This shop was Naruto's favorite, Ichiraku Ramen. There was a large hand-painted poster at the entrance of the shop, and Tsunade's image was drawn on it. The painting was really good, and it preserved Tsunade's spirit. Under Tsunade's image, there was a big line written, "Welcome Tsunade-sama back to Leaf, 10% off all ramen." Seeing this, Jiraiya smiled and thought that the owner of this shop was really good at doing business. Jiraiya opened the curtain of Ichiraku Ramen and walked inside. When the boss saw a customer coming in, he enthusiastically shouted, "Welcome! May I know what you need? Now, 10% off all the ramen in the shop." Seeing the enthusiastic gesture of the boss, Jiraiya unconsciously relaxed. He casually pulled out a chair and said to the boss is really good at doing business. Knowing that Tsunade-sama has returned to Wood Leaf, you can still think of such a promotion method. You must have made a lot of money today, right? Hearing Jiraiya's teasing words, the boss stretched out his hand and scratched the back of his head and said to Jiraiya, "I don't know about this. It's just that a customer who comes occasionally told me that doing more small activities can make the business better. He even personally drew the poster for me at the door. Don't say, although there's a 10% discount, the flow of people is indeed a little more than before." Hearing the boss mention the poster at the door, Jiraiya remembered the painting of Tsunade's spirit. He was also interested and asked the boss of Ichiraka Ramen. "Speaking of which, the painting at the entrance of your shop is really good. I've seen Tsunade-sama, and she is exactly the same as that painting. Even her temperament was drawn." Mentioning the poster at the door, Karate excitedly said to Jiraiya, as if he was showing off, "This was drawn by the sister of a regular customer. I didn't expect that someone could draw a person so similar." When Tsunade-sama's welcoming ceremony was held, I took a look from a distance and found that it was really similar to the poster at our door. "Wait, aren't you?" Mentioning Tsunade's welcoming ceremony, the boss looked at Jiraiya with long white hair and red paint on his face in front of him. The more he looked at him, the more he looked like Jiraiya, who was also a Sannin, following Tsunade at Wood Leaf's entrance. Jiraiya naturally knew that the boss recognized him, so he quickly reached out and pressed the boss's hand down and then said to the boss, Yes, I am. Don't make it public. I'm just your customer now." The boss's reaction was also very fast. He knew that he was a little too excited. "You know, even Hokage-sama occasionally comes to eat in his shop. Now that a Sannin came to his shop, wasn't something unacceptable. You're right, you're just my customer. Even Hokage-sama sometimes comes to my house to eat ramen. It's nothing," the boss said to Jiraiya as if he was showing off, as if he wanted to prove how popular his shop was. Because Naruto really loved Ichiraku Ramen. Occasionally Watergate would follow Naruto to eat at Ichiraku Ramen. After the initial surprise, the boss slowly got used to this kind of thing, and even occasionally showed off to his customers. Obviously, the boss wanted to show off the popularity of his shop. Jiraiya was naturally clear about Naruto's love for Ichiraku Ramen, so perhaps to cater to the boss's enthusiasm, Jiraiya also smiled and said to the boss, "That's really amazing. I didn't expect Hokage-sama to like this shop so much. I don't know what Hokage-sama likes to eat the most. Give me a bowl of ramen. Let me try it and see how delicious it is that even Hokage-sama can't forget it." Hearing Jiraiya's words, the boss's face was full of joy, so he shouted, "Okay, Hokage-sama's special, super large barbecued pork ramen." After that, the boss hurriedly went to make ramen for Jiraiya. At this moment, Jiraiya was also in a very good mood. Although he was just talking nonsense with an ordinary villager of Wood Leaf, Jiraiya found that he enjoyed this kind of atmosphere so much, more than when he was with Mito Manitis, Zhuan Xiaochun, Watergate, and Tsunade. Chapter 358. Jiraiya himself was born in the marketplace. So when Jiraiya sat in the slightly narrow Ichiraka Ramen and ate the simple Ichiraka Ramen without using any high-end ingredients, Jiraiya felt like he belonged here. Temesa himself was very talkative. Occasionally, he would joke with Jiraiya and say a few dirty jokes. The two old uncles also tacitly smiled at each other. Jiraiya's hearty laughter rushed out of Ichiraku Ramen. The thin curtain at the door echoed in the street. Occasionally, a few passers-by were attracted by Jiraiya's laughter. The bowl of noodles was quickly finished. Temesa looked around and saw that there were not many people in the shop, so he walked out from behind the counter and closed the door of his shop. Obviously, he did not intend to continue the business. He held a huge bottle in one hand. On the bottle seal, there were 3 big words Sakura Masamune. There was also a red ribbon near the mouth of the bottle. It looked very ugly. Jiraiya-sama, I see that there are not many people in the shop. Why don't you and I have a few drinks? With that, Temesa put the sake in his hand directly on the table. Two delicate and small wine glasses were also taken out by Temesa from the bar. Obviously, Temesa was also a person who loved wine. Sakura Masamune was a very famous brand of sake, and these two obviously expensive white porcelain wine glasses were not common goods. Jiraiya himself also likes to drink a few glasses. After seeing that Temesa actually took out a wine like Sakura Masamune, he couldn't help but want a drink. After nodding, he said to Temesa, "If you want to drink a few glasses, I naturally can't refuse. Besides, good wine is easy to get, but a bosom friend is hard to find. Although we haven't known each other for long, we can be regarded as friends. Drinking is naturally not a problem." After listening to Jiraiya's words, Temesa looked proud. He was very happy to put the wine glass in his hand in front of Jiraiya and himself. He gently pulled out the cork of the sake in his hand. A very elegant fragrance wafted out of the bottle. Jiraiya, who was sitting next to him, smelled this smell and knew that this bottle of Sakura Masamune was definitely not a wine that was mass-produced by the winery, but a specially brewed ancient wine, that is, a sake that was suitable for long-term storage. This bottle of wine is different from ordinary wine. Temba naturally knew that Jiraiya was a wine expert, so he introduced it to Jiraiya. Ordinary sake can't be stored for a long time. Once it exceeds the shelf life, it will become turbid and sour. Temba naturally knew that Jiraiya was a wine expert, so he introduced it to Jiraiya. However, this bottle of wine in my hand is the kind of ancient wine that could be stored for decades without going bad. It has the meaning of everlasting. Our Yu family and the family that brewed Sakura have been friends for generations. When my daughter was born, they specially sent 5 bottles of ancient wine as a congratulatory gift. It's been 17 or 18 years, so it's a daughter's sake? Jiraiya also understood why he had such a bottle of wine. It was obviously not easy to get. This is your daughter's dowry. Don't waste it. Let's find some other ordinary wine. When your daughter gets married, I will definitely come and have a good drink with you. Hearing Jiraiya's words, Temesa patted Jiraiya's shoulder and said to Jiraiya in a very forthright manner, "What are you talking about? Even if it's already opened, it can't be stored." Besides, Temesa looked back at his daughter, who was still helping in the kitchen, and said, "My daughter is very fierce. I don't know when she will find a good family. If we drink this bottle of sake, won't there still be 4 bottles of sake?" The meaning of being in pairs is also good. Seeing Temesa speaking to this point, Jiraiya naturally couldn't refuse. He gently picked up the white porcelain cup in front of him, obviously waiting for Temesa to pour him a glass of wine. Temesa immediately understood and raised the bottle in his hand to pour wine for Jiraiya. Seeing that Jiraiya's cup was full, Temesa also filled his own cup. The two of them didn't touch their glasses. Instead, they placed their glasses on their foreheads to show their respect. After that, they finished the wine in their glasses. The customers in Ichiraka Ramen also finished their meal. Knowing that Temesa had the habit of drinking wine after graduation, they all greeted him and walked out of the restaurant. Temesa's daughter, Chang, also knew that his father finally met someone who could drink with her. She also very considerately began to tidy up the various kitchen utensils, tables, chairs, and garbage on the ground in the restaurant. Time passed by little, and the 2-liter bottle of sake was almost emptied by Jiraiya and Temari. The alcohol content of sake itself wasn't that high, but the after-effects were very strong. What's more, the two drank a daughter's sake that had been stored for more than 10 years. This made Temesa and Jiraiya blush and talk nonsense from time to time. Oh, Jiraiya's mouth seemed to be stuffed with a ball. His words were somewhat muffled as he called Temesa. Oh, what's wrong? Temesa couldn't speak clearly, but he still subconsciously called out to Jiraiya. I'm so king sorry for the woman I love. For my own ideals, I drag her into this fire pit again. Why am I such a coward? She left with Leaf because she was heartbroken, but I still shamelessly pulled her back. I'm so sorry for her. So sorry for her. Under the stimulation of alcohol, Jiraiya finally spoke out the words that he had been suppressing in his heart for the entire day. Jiraiya's sudden outburst startled the already drunk Temesa and Chong Pu, who was sitting on a chair beside him. They obviously didn't expect the amiable Jiraiya to reveal such an emotional side at this moment. Although Temurai was drunk, it seemed that he still retained some consciousness. He patted Jiraiya's shoulder and said to Jiraiya, "Oh, it's okay. Since she's willing to come back with you, then naturally she's prepared to come back. Life, after all, has to be faced. Perhaps this is a fire pit for her, but isn't a fire pit the best place to forge real gold? Don't worry, there's still plenty of time. If she really can't stay any longer, she won't hold it in and will just leave." Inside the Ichiraku ramen shop, Ichiraku was using his muffled words to appease Jiraiya, who didn't seem to be so calm. Outside the door of Ichiraku ramen, a woman with short blonde hair and a very hot figure was standing outside the shop. She had a purple diamond pattern between her eyebrows. She was wearing a beige inner green vest. Hearing Jiraiya's shouts from inside, her eyes couldn't help but soften. Chapter 359. Jiraiya didn't know how he got home, because his memory stopped at the moment when he was fighting with Tsunade. As a ninja, this kind of hangover is simply unimaginable. Although Jiraiya believes that he will never say something that endangers with Leaf's secrets, he can't guarantee that he won't break out of some personal emotions. Jiraiya, who was annoyed at this moment, smelled the burnt smell of heated toast and fried eggs. There's actually breakfast? Jiraiya is a person who doesn't know how to cook at all. It can be seen from the paper shells of cups everywhere in Jiraiya's house. It's such a person. How can there be the smell of breakfast in his house? Isn't this a joke? Jiraiya lifted his quilt and found that his clothes have changed into his pajamas. He opened his pajama pants with a little curiosity. Jiraiya was immediately shocked. She had even changed her underwear. He put his feet into his slippers and walked out of his room in a panic. Jiraiya looked around and followed the smell of breakfast. A figure was standing in the kitchen at the moment, looking at the pan in front of him anxiously. There was a wisp of black smoke floating in the air at the moment, and the smell of burnt eggs was so conspicuous. But Jiraiya didn't have time to care about the burnt eggs because the person standing next to the stove and cooking in an apron turned out to be his teammate, Konoha Tsunade, who was also a Sannin like him. Are you kidding me? Tsunade can cook? Tsunade. Jiraiya said tentatively to Tsunade, who was standing opposite him. Tsunade seemed to be anxious about the burnt fried egg in front of her. She didn't even turn her face and shouted, "Ha ha! Ha ha! Ha ha! Ha ha! Ha ha ha! What are you shouting for? Is this the time for you to talk? Hurry up and go to the dining table and clean up that mess. If that place isn't clean by the time I finish cooking, I'll break 3 of your ribs." His tone was still a bit rude, but Jiraiya seemed to have relaxed. He reached out and touched his chest as if confirming something. Tsunade was still the original Tsunade. What he saw just now was an illusion, but in a place where Jiraiya couldn't see, Tsunade's face couldn't help but blush. Her face, which had become extremely youthful after cultivating the Inseal technique, combined with the blush on her face, made her look as beautiful as a 16-year-old girl in love. Because of Tsunade's threat just now, Jiraiya was cleaning up his house at full speed in order not to break 3 of his ribs. His speed was so fast that he left afterimages in the air. He didn't expect Jiraiya to use his full strength at this moment to clean up the house. Others didn't know, but Jiraiya knew that Tsunade was actually a little bit of a clean freak. If Tsunade saw that the house he cleaned up was still so messy, not to mention 3 of his ribs, even his life would be in danger. After a while, the house, which was originally filled with all kinds of garbage, was cleaned up spotless. But Jiraiya obviously didn't have so many bags to clean up the garbage. Where did so much garbage go? Jiraiya glanced at a large closet in the corner of his house from time to time. His nose even moved slightly as if he was smelling something strange. After sniffing for a while, he took out a bottle of air freshener and sprayed half of it at his house. However, The cabinet in the corner was still sprayed for a while. Just after Jiraiya was busy for a long time, Tsunade also finished her love breakfast. She was holding a plate with 2 cups of hot milk and 2 plates of toast and fried eggs that didn't look so good. "You get over here and eat." Glancing at Jiraiya, who was sitting on the floor, Tsunade said to Jiraiya very domineeringly, as if she was calling her own puppy. Okay, obviously he was treated like this, but Jiraiya still looked happy, as if he was very lucky to be treated like this by Tsunade. This is really a case of Zhou Yu beating Huang Gai, an S and a masochist. She put the plate in her hand on a small table on the ground, looked at the dark edges of the fried eggs, and looked at Jiraiya, who was sitting next to her with the "I'm very obedient" look. She pushed the plate in front of Jiraiya and said to Jiraiya, "Eat." Jiraiya was like a robot that received an order. He directly reached out and grabbed the toast inside and stuffed it into his mouth. But because he ate too fast, he still reached out and grabbed the cup of milk and poured it into his mouth. He seemed to want to swallow the food in his mouth. Tsunade saw Jiraiya's appearance, and for a while, she couldn't help but laugh. She moved a little to Jiraiya's side, reached out, and patted Jiraiya's back. She seemed to hope that Jiraiya would not choke, and said to Jiraiya in a very gentle tone, "Well, don't worry. No one is going to rob you. You're the only one who would wolf down the food I make." Even Roketree would find all kinds of excuses to run away when he saw me cooking. He didn't want to be ravaged by my food. Hearing Tsunade's words, Jiraiya looked at Tsunade for no reason, but found that there was a trace of tears in the corner of Tsunade's eyes at this moment. This little bit of tears made Jiraiya's heart ache. He immediately swallowed the food in his mouth and said to Tsunade, "How can it be? The food you make is delicious." That's Nawaki's ambition. He doesn't know how to cherish the fruits of his sister's labor. If it were me, I would eat it even if it's not delicious. Looking at Jiraiya's clumsy comfort at this moment, Tsunade stretched out her hand and wiped the tear from the corner of her eye, and a smile bloomed on her face again. The traces of tears left on her face matched with Tsunade's bright face at this moment. She was like a red rose stained with dew, delicate and fresh. "This is what you said. Then why don't you hurry up and finish these things?" Tsunade's rare coquettishness had slowly melted Jiraiya's manly heart into sweet candy, making it difficult to part with such a sweet feeling. Chapter 360. While eating, Jiraiya couldn't sit quietly anymore. After all, there were still a lot of questions in Jiraiya's heart. Whether it was how he came back from Ichiraka Ramen or how his clothes were all changed, these questions really made Jiraiya's heart itch. He really wanted to figure out what happened. After holding it for a long time, Jiraiya finally couldn't hold it anymore. Reiko, who had eaten half of the toast in her hand, tidied up her pajamas, turned slightly so that his face could face Tsunade's face. Jiraiya said very seriously, "Tsunade, although your cooking is delicious, I still have a few questions to ask you. Last night, I drank too much at Ichiraka Ramen's restaurant. What happened to me?" Before he finished speaking, Tsunade glanced at Jiraiya. She seemed to be curious why Jiraiya asked such a retarded question and said to Jiraiya, "I got it back for you." Asking questions always has to be done step by step. First, ask how he came back, then ask how he changed his clothes, and finally ask who changed his underwear. Well, Jiraiya gave himself a string of 666, 6666 to praise his high-end chat skills. "Then what about my clothes?" Jiraiya tentatively asked Tsunade again, hoping to push his ultimate question a little closer. Tsunade was very cooperative. Although she still looked at Jiraiya like he was retarded, she still nodded and said to Jiraiya, "Yes, I also changed your pajamas." "Very well. The best part is coming soon." Thinking of the question he was about to ask, Jiraiya's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. He seemed to be very nervous. He reached out to take his milk to calm himself down, but Jiraiya, who was nervous, reached out his hand to Tsunade's glass of milk and poured it all into his mouth without thinking. Tsunade looked at Jiraiya with a restrained expression as he drank her milk. That was something she had drunk before. What does this wretched, perverted guy want to do? He really did drink. Now, there was still a little bit of alcohol left in his body to boost his courage. So, Then my underwear is, Jiraiya asked his last question intermittently. Tsunade was still very indifferent to Jiraiya and said, I also changed it. Hearing Tsunade's cold answer, Jiraiya was a little angry at that time. Although he was a little old, he was still very rich. In the past, when he went to the bath, everyone looked at his work with a respectful attitude. Since Tsunade changed his underwear for him, she naturally saw it. But why was she so cold? No man would be able to tolerate it. Don't you think it's magnificent? Jiraiya was still struggling, but Tsunade was still calm. Looking at Jiraiya's strange behavior, Tsunade pondered for a while. She seemed to have just understood what Jiraiya meant by magnificent. He said to Jiraiya calmly, and even with a little pity, Jiraiya, I'm a doctor, a medical ninja. I still know some things, and I also know the average of men. Don't be too sad. Take good care of yourself, and keep a good schedule. Although there is no way to increase your size, it can still make you a little useful. Facing Tsunade's blatant flirting, Jiraiya didn't feel a little excited at the moment. Tsunade's words, as long as one has a normal IQ, they should understand. Tsunade meant that Jiraiya's capital was not so magnificent, and he even had some lingering thoughts. Hearing Tsunade's words, Jiraiya even began to suspect that the admiring eyes of the group of people when he went to the bathhouse were actually pitiful eyes. Jiraiya immediately turned gray at the moment, eating the food in front of him like a machine. Tsunade walked to the kitchen, took out a box of milk, and poured it into her quilt. But her face had a touch of shyness and excitement after a successful prank. If I don't provoke you in return, wouldn't it be a disgrace to my reputation as Tsunade Heim? Thinking about it, Tsunade couldn't help but remember what she saw last night, and her cheeks blushed even more. In the Hokage's office, Tsunade and Jiraiya both sat in the chair opposite Watergate. Tsunade was in a good state. She looked energetic, and she was obviously very motivated. At this moment, Jiraiya's eyes were bloodshot, and even the original shape of the tobacco pipe had become heavier. He muttered words like size and function back and forth in his mouth. Watergate couldn't say anything to his master, so he could only put Jiraiya aside and said to Tsunade first. Tsunade-sama, we have discussed the topic of how to train with Leaf's medical ninja before. After a discussion between me and the elders of Konoha, we agreed that you could select a ninja from the newly promoted genin for professional training. We have also prepared some information for you. You can choose the ninja you like for training. With that, Watergate also handed a thick folder on his desk to Tsunade. Among them was the comprehensive analysis of the genin who graduated from with Leaf in the past 2 years. It was specially integrated to help Tsunade select training personnel, but it was uncertain how much Watergate's personal information was mixed in it. After all, it was better to use such a precious resource to train ninjas who could be loyal to Tsunade, right? Tsunade didn't care how much Watergate thought about this information. Before coming back, Tsunade said that she would not accept any combat tasks, and she would only be responsible for logistics. Tsunade also planned to verify this information herself. Presumably, with Watergate's political vision, he wouldn't cheat on such a thing. Otherwise, wouldn't Watergate's fraud be exchanged for Tsunade's fraud? It doesn't make any sense at all. Tsunade waved her hand, indicating that she could do her own things. Tsunade also knew that she shouldn't stay, so she turned around and walked out of the door. Chapter 361. Seeing that Tsunade had walked out of the door of his office, Watergate finally had a chance to pay attention to his master, Jiraiya, who was just sitting on the side with a dazed expression. Master! Master! Watergate tried to call his master, but found that Jiraiya didn't respond. Watergate could only stand up from his position, holding his desk with one hand and waving his hand in front of Jiraiya. Finally, Jiraiya broke free from his world. Master, are you okay? I have something to trouble you. Seeing that Jiraiya's matter was restored, Watergate also sat down in his seat and began to take out a document beside him to hand it to Jiraiya. But Jiraiya suddenly jumped up from where he was sitting and directly interrupted Watergate's words. Jiraiya looked anxious, looking at his apprentice sitting opposite him, and said, Watergate, Come here. Master has a presumptuous request. Take off your pants, and I will explain the reason to you. Such words directly made Watergate's knees soften, and he had an impulse to kneel down. He has always known that his master likes Tsunade. But now, why did his sensei ask him to take off his pants? Could it be that he was stimulated by Tsunade, and his whole body became bent? Although he is handsome, he is a man with a wife. How can he offer his chrysanthemum like this? The chilling sensation emanating from his buttocks caused Minato to sink into an exceedingly sensitive state of mind as he probed his master with a probing tone. Master, did you just confess to Tsunade-sama and get cruelly rejected? You don't look normal at all, Watergate said to Jiraiya worriedly. After hearing Watergate's very unreliable words, Jiraiya gradually broke free from his frenzied emotions. Although it involves his privacy, Watergate is like his own child, and there is nothing to hide. So Jiraiya told Watergate about what happened between him and Tsunade. Watergate was stunned after listening to the story. Fortunately, although his wife Kushina learned medical ninjutsu from Tsunade for a while, she didn't directly become his disciple. Otherwise, God knows what his lovely wife Kushina will become. If she's really the same as Tsunade now, then I'm really a little excited. Ba. After clearing all the complicated thoughts in his mind and trying to calm himself down, Watergate said to Jiraiya, Master, you don't have to worry. I've seen your friend. She is really above average. I think Tsunade-sama just wants to tease you, so you don't have to take it to heart. Let's get down to business. Hearing the recognition from his apprentice, Jiraiya, who was very self-doubting, finally got some spirit. I didn't expect that Tsunade, who I have loved for so many years, is so dirty. It seems that I have to find a way to improve my flirty skills. Of course, Jiraiya only thought so in his heart. After all, his apprentice has said that he wants to talk about business. So naturally, Jiraiya has to give Watergate face. Tell me, what do you need me to help you with? Watergate handed the information he just picked up to Jiraiya. Jiraiya reached out and took it in his hand and began to slowly read the information. Jiraiya's originally lazy demeanor has become sharp at this moment. It seems that there's a kind of anger spreading in his heart. Nagato, Konan, and Yahiko. These three children are the founders of the Akatsuki organization that has always brought us great trouble, and they are also planning a plan that is enough to sweep the entire shinobi world. Although Jiraiya said it as a question, his dignified tone showed that he already believed the records in this document. Watergate took the document from Jiraiya's hand, pointed to a special symbol in the corner of the document, and said to Jiraiya, This document was found in a secret data room of Root when I was annihilating Root. It records in detail the birth of the Akatsuki and the intervention of Danzo and Hanzo the Salamander in the annihilation of the Akatsuki and the various small tricks that the Akatsuki has been using. I think the Akatsuki must be planning something big. And Sensei, you also said that this man named Nagato has the eyes of the Rakuto Sannin. We have to be careful. What do you need me to do? Clean up the sect. Jiraiya's eyes flashed with a trace of anger. Obviously facing such a disciple, he already had a trace of determination in his heart. Watergate waved his hand and said to Jiraiya, For the time being, it's not the right time. If we don't kill the snake, it will only harm us. We can't attack so easily. The goal of the Akatsuki can be judged to be the Bijou, and with Leaf has the most powerful Bijou, the Nine Tails. Since we have such a good card, naturally, we can't play it so carelessly. What we need is to let Naruto grow quickly and play a greater role in the future battle, Watergate said, and Jiraiya already understood what he meant. You need me to help you train Naruto? Minato nodded and continued. That's right. Yes. About the way to control the chakra in my body, I have already asked Kushina to summarize a set of methods, and I will give it to you later. After a while, you will take Naruto with you to the shinobi world, to a certain extent, disrupt the Akatsuki's line of sight, and do everything possible to improve Naruto's strength. The shinobi world is getting more and more difficult to calm down. While it's still calm, we have to do our best to accumulate our strength, Watergate said, and his whole body stood up. Jiraiya looked at his disciple, but found that his disciple at this moment was surging with an emotion that was completely invisible to him: ambition. After becoming the Hokage with real power, Watergate's ambition began to expand. Although Watergate still abided by his bottom line, in many things, Watergate is no longer as gentle as he used to be. It seems that everyone will become different after having power, whether it's the 3 generations Hokage, Orochimaru, first Hokage, or second Hokage, for power, for their own status. They really made the shinobi world bleed too much. This is not what Jiraiya wants to see. Chapter 362. After the discussion between Jiraiya and Watergate, Naruto, who was confused and excited, quietly left the village with Jiraiya. Naruto didn't know what he would face in the future. To some extent, he even became a chess piece in the game between his father and Akatsuki. For Naruto, perhaps leaving Wood Leaf with Jiraiya this time was actually the same as the previous mission he took with Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura to the Wave Country. It was just a slightly longer trip. What Jiraiya and Naruto didn't know was that when they left the Wood Leaf, there was actually a person standing in a hidden place watching them leave the Wood Leaf. This person was Tsunade, who had just returned to the Wood Leaf. She thought that her overt and covert hints these days had made Jiraiya understand her feelings. But now, when Jiraiya encountered Wood Leaf's business that conflicted with her personal affairs, he still chose to leave resolutely instead of continuing to cultivate feelings with her. Looking at Jiraiya's back that was slightly old because of the vicissitudes of life, Tsunade could only shake her head and laugh at her ignorance. Didn't she already know? Jiraiya was a fool, no matter what happened. He would always put Wood Leaf first. He had already known about this for decades. But why? Now, watching Jiraiya leave Wood Leaf, in Tsunade's heart, there was a kind of sadness as if she was abandoned. Sparkling teardrops were born in her eyes, gently brushing across Tsunade's smooth cheeks, leaving a faint tear stain, which made people feel heartache. Tears dripped from her chin, and drops of tears blended into the soil and disappeared, leaving only a little bit of moisture. But the scarred heart seemed to have added another scar at this moment, which was difficult to heal. I am Tsunade, the current director of Kiba Hospital and the commander-in-chief of the Wood Leaf Medical Force. Of course, you don't need to remember that I have such an identity. Here, I only have one identity, and that is your sensei. You are all ninjas with medical ninja talent that I have found from the new ninjas in the past 2 years. In the next period of time, you will receive a training plan designated by me to train you to become a truly qualified medical ninja. If I feel that the best among you is to my liking, I may accept him or her as my official disciple. Looking at the hundreds of young ninjas standing in front of her, Tsunade said to them in a very heroic manner. Behind Tsunade stood Shizen, who had always been Tsunade's little follower, and Kushina, who had studied under Tsunade for a while. Before, because Tsunade and Jiraiya's speed was too fast, Shizen didn't follow Jiraiya and Tsunade to participate in the welcome ceremony for Tsunade's return at the Wood Leaf Gate. After arriving at Wood Leaf, Shizen basically lived in seclusion to take care of Tsunade's life. This was the first time she appeared in front of so many people. Although she forced herself to be calm, after all, she was still young, and her psychological quality was not so good. She couldn't help but blush with excitement. Compared to Shizun, Kushina, who had red hair and looked equally heroic, seemed to be more at ease. Over the years, as her injured body slowly recovered and Watergate's power continued to expand, Kushina also slowly appeared in the public eye. Watergate naturally had unconditional trust in his wife, and many things were slowly delegated to Kushina. One of the executors of the plan to cultivate a new type of medical ninja was also designated as Kushina, who had a certain understanding of medical ninjutsu. Hearing Tsunade's promise to accept a disciple, the young ninjas standing below immediately became excited. Almost everyone standing here knew something about Wood Leaf's medical system, and as the leader of Wood Leaf's medical industry, Tsunade's deeds were naturally known by these children. If she could become the disciple of such a great person, wouldn't her future be limitless? Standing in the crowd, Haruno Sakura, Yamanaka Ino, and Hyuga Hinata's eyes also lit up at this moment. Sakura was selected as one of the trainee medical ninja because of her meticulous control of chakra. Yamanaka Ino was extremely strong because of the Yamanaka family's secret technique and also qualified to become a medical ninja. Hinata was even more so. The Byakugan itself was a medical artifact. Even experienced medical ninja couldn't identify the meridians and acupuncture points. As newly graduated genin, all three children became members of Woodleaf's medical ninja training program. Seeing that the children in front of her were all excited, Tsunade also turned to look at Shizen standing behind her. Shizen also understood Tsunade's meaning and stepped forward a few steps to the group of ninjas standing below the stage and said, "Everyone, quiet down. I have something to announce. You have all passed the test of control of chakra and spiritual strength, so I will now announce what the first assessment is for you," Shizun said, and with a wave of her hand, the ninjas belonging to Kiba Hospital, standing on both sides, took a scroll and distributed it to each ninja standing below. As we all know, medical ninjutsu is actually a ninjutsu system that uses various forms of stimulation to make the cells of a human body perform various functions. As the foundation of all medical ninjutsu, the cultivation method of healing technique is recorded in detail in the scroll in your hands. Every medical ninja should not be a mass-produced healing machine, but a qualified ninja with their own opinions and thoughts. Therefore, your first assessment is to learn the healing technique recorded in the scroll in your hands and apply it to living body healing. Anyone who can pass this assessment will have the opportunity to receive more professional medical ninja guidance. Everyone, is it clear? In the face of Shizun's sudden question, whether they were ignorant or really understood, they all answered with a loud yes. Tsunade nodded and left the huge classroom with Shina, Kushina, Shizen, and a group of medical ninjas belonging to Kiba Hospital, leaving only the genin who were either sad or excited. Chapter 363. Looking at the rabbit with a shallow wound on its thigh, Sakura slowly pressed her palms covered in a layer of green light onto the rabbit's wound. At this moment, Xiaoying's eyes were focused on the place where her hand was pressing. Her mental strength was also closely observing the recovery of the rabbit's wound. Feeling that it was about time, Sakura slowly moved her hands away. The green light that was originally attached to her hands also slowly dissipated. Grabbing the rabbit and walking in front of Xianxia, Sakura said to Xianxia as if she was presenting a treasure, "Uncle Nangang, come and check. This time, I feel that I have done a perfect job. I must have healed the little rabbit's wound." Sakura's face was filled with pride. This was because she had failed a few times before. The healing technique she used was either completely ineffective or the wound was not completely healed. This time, Sakura felt that she had used the healing technique to its maximum potential. There should be no problems. Is that so? Then I will help you check. Hearing Sakura's confident words, Xianxia also smiled as he took the rabbit from Sakura's hands. The little rabbit that was originally trembling and panicking in Sakura's hands immediately calmed down when it was in Xianxia's hands. Its red eyes no longer showed any panic. Instead, it showed a sense of enjoyment. It was obviously affected by the natural energy that occasionally drifted from Xianxia's body. Xianxia's index finger brushed past the original wound on the rabbit's thigh. Xianxia was using his internal energy to slowly sense the condition of the rabbit's wound. Soon, Xianxia withdrew his finger and said to Sakura, "Indeed, compared to before, your healing technique has improved a lot. But this time there's still some flaws. Although the wound on the rabbit's body is not big, it is still a bit deep. The muscle tissue on its thigh has also been damaged to a certain extent. But this time, your treatment only healed the rabbit's surface. Some of the internal structures are still bleeding." After saying that, Nangongja also took the rabbit in front of Sakura. He gently removed the fur from the wound, allowing Sakura to see the rabbit's skin. Obviously, the original injured part of the rabbit was not only showing the freshly healed pink, but also some slightly thicker red blood. This was a phenomenon caused by internal bleeding. Although Sakura's wound was healed this time, it was still not perfect. With Nangongja's understanding of Tsunade, if it was only to this extent, she would definitely not be allowed to pass the assessment. After hearing Nangongja's evaluation, Sakura's originally excited little face became gloomy at the moment. Nangongja naturally understood that Sakura was in a dead end of self-denial at the moment. So he stretched out his hand and touched Sakura's pink hair and very gently said to Sakura, "Don't be discouraged. Medical ninjutsu itself is a very difficult type of ninjutsu to use. Even a most basic healing technique needs hard work to achieve. You have only been exposed to healing for a day or two, and you can already use your own chakra to stimulate cell regeneration. This is already a good level. Your Ro or Nasan has also learned medical ninjutsu systematically. If you really want to improve yourself, it's better to ask your Ro or Nasan." While comforting Sakura, Nangongja also glanced at Nangong Ro, who was sitting next to him and seemed a little absent-minded at the moment. After hearing Nangongja's words, Sakura was also surprised. After all, medical ninjutsu is a rare species in the whole ninja world, and this Rorane-san, who is very familiar with her, is actually a medical ninjutsu who has received systematic medical ninjutsu, which made Sakura feel incredible for a while. Although Nangong Ro seemed a little absent-minded, but what Nangongja said just now was still heard by Nangong Ro. Knowing that she can help Sakura, Nangong Ro said with a gentle smile on her face, "Sakura, if you really want to achieve something in medical ninjutsu, I naturally have to help you achieve your goal. But now you still have to try to use healing to heal some living creatures first and accumulate some experience in using medical ninjutsu. Only in this way can I observe your mistakes and then correct some of your problems." After listening to Nangong Ro's words, Sakura also nodded and returned to the operating table in Nangongja's yard where she had just used healing. She quickly cut a wound on the rabbit's body with kunai and continued to use healing to heal this wound. At this time, Yichue, who was sitting not far from Nangongja, waved her hand and called Nangongja. Although Nangongja was a little puzzled, he still sat beside Yichue and waited for Yichue to speak. "Ja, is it a blessing or a curse to become a medical ninjutsu?" Yichue looked at her daughter, Sakura, who was still diligently practicing healing, and her eyes were full of worry for her daughter. Yichue, who is not a ninja, still has a smattering of knowledge about medical ninjutsu. So when she saw her daughter wanting to become a medical ninjutsu, Yichue couldn't help but ask Nangongja, who is the strongest person she knows. "Yabuki, to be honest, as a ninja, there is no such thing as complete safety. But medical ninjutsu is different from other ninjas who only focus on combat power. If it is a one-on-one confrontation, ordinary medical ninjutsu may not play a big role. But in the face of a large-scale melee, medical ninjutsu is the group of people with the strongest survivability." Recalling his combat experience, Nangongja explained to Yichue. However, Nangongja still has some words that he didn't say to Yichue. Medical ninjutsu is not only good at healing, but every qualified medical ninjutsu is also a qualified poison master. Whether it is assassination or ambush, they are good at it. But such words are naturally not suitable for Yichue, who may become a medical ninjutsu. So Nangongja quietly covered up these things. When Yichue heard that medical ninjutsu is the most life-saving profession, the relaxed look in her eyes was so clear that Nangongja also sighed in his heart. Chapter 364. There has never been absolute security in this world. Nangongja knows this. Sakura knows this. Even Yichue, who is not a ninja, knows this. But as a mother, Yichue still hopes that her child can live a healthy, happy, and safe life. Such requirements are not harsh, But such requirements are so difficult to achieve in a world like the shinobi world. In the shinobi world, there are countless people who have ulterior motives and are good at currying favor. Every day in different places, no one knows how many fights and conspiracies are staged. If a shinobi world war breaks out in an unlucky year, then whether it is ninja or civilians, they will suffer great losses. Why is the Akatsuki, as a shinobi village with such a low starting point, can be so tyrannical to such a point? To a large extent, it is because the Akatsuki's concept of bringing peace to the shinobi world has been recognized by many people. Those who have been hurt because of the war voluntarily joined the Akatsuki, making the Akatsuki stronger step by step. If you have to find a reason to describe why the Akatsuki can become so tyrannical in addition to Pain's own Rinnegan, in fact, it is more because of the people's desire. In the shinobi world, whether it is ninja or civilians, in fact, most of them yearn for peace, and the Akatsuki is a huge banner when the people of the shinobi world need it most. But now, because the Akatsuki has attacked the Bloodcloth Pavilion and Nangongja is nominally affiliated with the Wood Leaf Village, Nangongja has been standing on the opposite side of the Akatsuki. Moreover, in Nangongja's view, although the Akatsuki has a good hand, he doesn't know why they always play very bad. Obviously, the Akatsuki has such a grand goal of pacifying the shinobi world. But what Nangongja saw time and time again is the madness and unscrupulousness of the Akatsuki's members. Whether it is the unscrupulous when releasing the 9 tails to destroy the Wood Leaf Village, the arrogance when attacking the Bloodcloth Pavilion, or driving the tailed beasts in Little Linger's former residence, causing people to suffer. Was such behavior really worthy of such a grand goal? After saying so much, in fact, Nangongja and Akatsuki are already standing on opposite sides, regardless of whether it will be Wood Leaf representing the old forces of the shinobi world or the new forces represented by Akatsuki in the future. In the end, which side will have the advantage? Nangongja could only choose to fully invest in the Wood Leaf forces or completely withdraw the power of Bloodcloth Pavilion and hide. There was no possibility of reconciliation with Akatsuki. Tsunade looked at the documents in her hand with a serious face, because she was holding a few new genin who were expected to be taught directly by Tsunade after many rounds of selection. Among them, Sakura Haruno, Ino Yamanaka, and Hyuga Hinata were on the list. As a person with a prominent background and a high position in Wood Leaf for a long time, Tsunade naturally picked out these 3 girls quickly. To be honest, these 3 people were extremely rare, whether it was talent or hard work, so they smoothly passed through many tests and entered the final level, which was Tsunade's self-selection time. With Tsunade's political sensitivity, she already knew that these 3 children were Watergate's personal goods, and they were also Watergate's means to pave the way for his children. After a few years, as long as these 3 children don't die young, they will become the mainstay of Wood Leaf, and they will also become important supporters of Naruto, becoming Hokage. Tsunade knew Watergate's mind, but Tsunade didn't want to become a puppet in Watergate's hands. Of course, these 3 people need to be chosen, but she can't choose all of them, otherwise she will be at a disadvantage. This is why Tsunade's face was so serious at the moment. It was really difficult to choose. Needless to say, Hinata was the eldest daughter of the current head of the Hyuga family. Although some news said that Hinata wasn't so valued, her identity was still there. Ino, the heir of the Ino Shikacho Yamanaka family. A long time ago, these 3 families firmly stood on the side of Hokage, and even had a lot of relationship with Tsunade. Giving up like this would be tantamount to ruining her reputation. Sakura, although born a civilian, has a close relationship with Nangongja, Wood Leaf's new powerhouse. It was almost as if Nangongja raised her as his own daughter. After all, Tsunade's strength will only decline with the increase of age, and Nangongja is young and strong. When the time comes, she will have to trouble Nangongja to take care of her. Watergate's personal goods are difficult to deal with. Not only does it involve the interests of Watergate's own, but it also involves the interests of more people. If one of them is given up, it will cause bad consequences. Tsunade also felt very difficult at the moment. The pen with some cinnabar was raised and lowered several times, but there was no way to make a comment on the materials in front of her. Hyuga family is the past, Inoshikicho is the present, and Nangongja is the future. These three things, what should she choose? After careful consideration, Tsunade finally raised her hand and wrote the word rejected on the document in her hand. And on this document, Hinata's name was written on it. This is the choice made by Tsunade. It has nothing to do with Sakura, Ino, or Hinata's talent. It's just a choice for her future situation after weighing the pros and cons. Nangongja himself is a strong person in the growth period. There is no need to offend such a person. Inoshikicho family works hard and has a close relationship with the Hokage clan. It is natural for her to give them face. But Hyuga family, as one of the two major wood leaf clans, now that the Uchiha clan is destroyed and Hyuga family dominates, everyone knows that Hyuga family is a grasshopper in the autumn and can only barely survive. Therefore, Tsunade made the choice to give up accepting Hinata as a disciple, but she can't end it so casually. So Tsunade put down the things in her hand and called her disciple, Shizun. Shizun, go and get my medical ninjutsu notes and some gifts for visiting. We will go out together in a while. Hearing Tsunade's words, Shizun couldn't react for a while. After all, Tsunade doesn't like such things. Tsunade once said that instead of wasting time on meaningless things like visiting each other and greeting each other, it's more interesting to drink a little wine and open a gambling house. However, obviously, after returning to Woodleaf, Tsunade has begun to change her way of life. She doesn't know whether it's good or bad. Chapter 365. Standing in front of the Hyuga family's gate, Tsunade was in a trance. Although it seems that the Hyuga family is still a big wood leaf family, Tsunade didn't know why she felt that the Hyuga family was declining from the inside out. Sure enough, no matter how glorious it was, there will always be a day of decline. Tsunade didn't know why, but she suddenly had such a thought in her mind. She asked Shizun to go to the gate and explained her purpose to the gatekeeper. Tsunade stood at the gate and waited for someone to welcome her in. But unexpectedly, Hyuga Hayashi, as the patriarch of the Hyuga clan, actually walked out of the gate of the Hyuga clan at this moment while holding the hand of his youngest daughter, Hyuga Hanabi. Seeing Hyuga Hayashi, even as a Sannin, Tsunade had to give some face to the Hyuga family. So she hurried a few steps forward and slightly bowed to Hayashi. I thought it was the younger generation of the Hyuga family who came to greet us, but I didn't expect the head of the Hyuga family to personally come out to greet us. We are visitors. How can the head of the family come out to greet us? As a member of a big family, Tsunade naturally understood that it was a great honor for the head of the Hyuga family, Hyuga Hayashi, to personally come out to greet them. She remembered that she came to visit because of the Hyuga family's face. Even Tsunade felt a little guilty. It's okay, it's okay. Tsunade-sama is a direct descendant of the Senju family. Compared to the Hyuga family, it's a real family. It's not a big deal for me to come out to greet you, and I shouldn't stand at the gate like this. Please come in for a chat. With that said, Hyuga Hayashi made a gesture, apparently inviting Tsunade and Shizun to enter the Hyuga family's land. Then it's better to accept. Tsunade was a forthright person. When she heard Hayashi's words, she naturally didn't have any resistance. Instead, she accepted Hayashi's invitation. As the head of the clan, Hyuga Hayashi's courtyard was naturally located in the center of the Hyuga clan. Compared to the other Hyuga houses, Hyuga Hayashi's courtyard was large, but it didn't have any ostentatious extravagance. Instead, it exuded a simple aura. Perhaps this was the spirit of the Hyuga family? After all, in Tsunade's impression, most Hyuga ninjas were somewhat old-fashioned and conservative. Led by Hyuga Hayashi, the four of them entered the courtyard belonging to the patriarch. They sat in a tea house. After inviting Tsunade and Shizun to sit down, Hyuga Hayashi began to wash his hands, rinse his mouth, and prepare for the tea ceremony. Knowing that Hayashi was following the ancient etiquette of serving tea to the guests, Tsunade naturally watched patiently as Hayashi lit the charcoal, boiled the water, and made the tea step by step. This kind of tea ceremony was very time-consuming. Even if Hyuga Hayashi's movements were very agile, it still took nearly half an hour. Tsunade and Shizen, who usually didn't like to kneel, felt uncomfortable at this moment. Looking at Hyuga Hanabi, who came with Hayashi, the little girl sat steadily at the moment, as if she was already used to it. "Please." Holding a huge teacup, Hayashi's left hand held the bottom of the teacup, and his right hand held the edge of the teacup. He slowly rotated the teacup in his hand, and the bright yellow pattern vaguely resembling a flower on the blue-gray teacup was facing Tsunade. He placed the teacup on his forehead and handed it to Tsunade. After seeing Hayashi handing over the teacup to her, the solemn feeling from the bloodline immediately emerged from Tsunade's heart. Tsunade straightened her body and respectfully reached out her hands to take the teacup handed over by Hyuga Hayashi. Holding the bottom of the teacup with her left hand and the edge of the teacup with her right hand, Tsunade turned the yellow pattern that was originally facing her towards Hyuga Hayashi again. Tsunade raised the teacup to her forehead, bowed slightly to show her gratitude, and put the teacup in her hand in front of her. Then Tsunade reached out and picked up the teacup again, and finally drank the sticky tea in her mouth. This procedure not only looked cumbersome, but every action had extremely strict rules. Whether it was the angle of the arm bend or the way the body leans forward, there were certain rules. If one didn't come from a big family, it would take a long time to be familiar with this series of rules. The tea rolled on the tip of Tsunade's tongue, and after swallowing the tea into her stomach, Tsunade also expressed her respect for Hyuga Hayashi's tea ceremony very respectfully. With this, the tea tasting was finally over, and the real show will begin here. Lord, in fact, this time I came to the Hyuga clan to apologize. Facing the head of the Hyuga clan, Tsunade maintained a proper respect to Hyuga Hayashi. Perhaps because he has been in a high position for a long time. Although Tsunade said that she came to apologize to him, Hyuga Hayashi's expression didn't change. It was as if the person Tsunade wanted to apologize to wasn't him. Tsunade-sama, why do you say that? In fact, whether it's your situation or the Hyuga clan situation, we know each other's situation very well. There's no right or wrong in this matter. If it weren't for some people in the clan who can't see the situation clearly, in fact, this drama wouldn't have happened. Although the two didn't say it explicitly, everyone knew that this so-called drama was about Hinata's participation in the medical ninja training program. As the head of the clan, Hayashi naturally knew that the Hyuga clan was in its last days. No matter what kind of battle, the Hyuga clan was the most likely to be sacrificed. Although it's rumored that I don't like my eldest daughter very much, how can a parent be so cold-blooded? Hanabi is my child, and Hinata is also my child. This time, this group of people urged my daughter to go up and embarrass herself. No matter what, I won't let my child lose face. Hayashi's words, no matter how you listen to it, sounded a little threatening. Tsunade had a violent temper, and she would directly explode if the slightest displeased her. But being threatened by Hayashi here, Tsunade still didn't make a scene. Instead, she was very calm and said to Hayashi, "You and I are just chess pieces on someone else's chessboard. No matter what we do, it's actually under someone else's control. This time, it's true that I lost face for the Hyuga clan, so I will try my best to get back the face you lost. I also brought my medical notes. Although it's not something precious, it's still a small token of my sincerity." Chapter 366. As a Hyuga with Byakugan, which can see through the human body and directly observe the human body's tendons and chakra flow, she has a unique condition to become a medical ninja. Even Hyuga Hinata, who is now learning under a genjutsu ninja like Kurenai, gradually began to come into contact with medical ninjutsu through Kurenai's introduction. At this moment, Tsunade handed over the medical notes that recorded many of her theories and experiences. It was simply a treasure for the Hyuga family. In fact, the Hyuga family let Hinata participate in such a medical ninja training program in order to establish a friendship with Tsunade. Although it sounds like Hinata was not selected, there's no way to directly unite Tsunade and the Hyuga family. But as a politically sensitive person, Tsunade has already noticed that she has to establish a good relationship with a family like the Hyuga family. The Senju family has gradually declined in the Shinobi World War and the internal consumption of woodleaf. Now, they can't even compare to some small families in the woodleaf village. Over the years, no ninja has awakened wood release, so the Senju family can only give Tsunade some nominal help. If she wants to be free and not live as a puppet of others in the woodleaf village, Tsunade must join forces with the Hyuga family. And this medical note was Tsunade's gift to the Hyuga family. You and I actually understand that the status of master and apprentice is actually a guarantee of a relationship. In the past, the Hyuga family was also a family that competed for the hegemony of the shinobi world with the Uchiha family and the Senju family. But now, only the Hyuga family still retains the superficial glory on the surface. But you and I both know that Konoha can't tolerate a single family that dominates the village. The Senju family and the Uchiha family are examples. So you and I are a community of interests. Why do we have to add the shackles of master and apprentice? Tsunade is not a fool, and Hyuga Hayashi is also very smart after many years of experience. So when Tsunade talked to Hyuga Hayashi, she didn't play any language tricks to prove her astuteness. Instead, she began to talk with Hayashi very openly about the dilemma they faced and the only solution, alliance. You're right. Listening to Tsunade's words, Hayashi was silent for a moment. How could he not understand the truth of the saying, a tall tree attracts the wind? But the Hyuga family can't retreat, because once they retreat, they will be eaten without leaving any bones behind. From today onwards, the Hyuga family and you, Tsunade-sama, are the strongest allies. It's not because of how ambitious we are, nor is it because of how broad-minded we are. We just want to protect ourselves so that we can get the freedom and safety we deserve. Tsunade reached out and shook Hayashi's hand. Although she said that she has no ambition and big heart, at this moment, it's not easy to ignore the light in their eyes. No desire? It's easier said than done. The reason why she said that she has no desire is because she doesn't have the ability to realize her desire. If there came a day when their abilities reached the edge of their desires, then every single one of them would become the craziest lunatic, struggling and roaring as they try to turn their desires into reality. While Tsunade and Hayashi were thinking about each other's future, Shizune and Hanabi didn't seem to be frightened by their sensei, father's words at all. Instead, they were very dedicated to their duties and stimulated their five senses to the maximum, quietly perceiving whether someone might be monitoring them. In the Hokage's office, an Umbu was kneeling in front of Watergate at this moment. It seemed that he had just reported some important information and was waiting for Watergate's next order. On the other hand, Minato was unhurriedly stroking his chin with his fingers as if he was thinking about something. But at this moment, Minato's eyes shone brightly as if he had seen something interesting. She's worthy of being from a big family. Even if her family is in decline, she's still familiar with a set of methods. She just handed me the list of people who passed, but then she brought her men to the Hyuga family's door. Even the old stubborn Hyuga, Hayashi, personally went out to greet Tsunade's arrival. I didn't expect Tsunade's sense of smell to be so sharp. Isn't it good to be a clay bodhisattva, worshipped by people? Why did she have to make so much trouble? In the end, it's really unknown who will suffer. Or is it that some of the things that happened in the Senju clan have made it difficult for this strong woman to suppress the backlog in her heart? Watergate murmured unconsciously, but the Umbu kneeling in front of Watergate was already trembling at this moment. These things, is it something that I can casually know? Although I can guarantee that I will never reveal a word, but my guarantee is not an effective way to make people feel at ease. I'm just a small Umbu who passes information. Usually, I pass information in letters sealed with scorched lacquer. But now, I can hear a lot of things that I shouldn't tell outsiders. So, can I really leave the Hokage's office intact? Watergate also seemed to be aware of the abnormality of the Umbu in front of him. The quick-witted Watergate has quickly understood the thoughts in the Umbu's heart. He stood up from his position and slowly walked to the side of the Umbu. His slender fingers gently rested on the Umbu's shoulder. "Well, don't be afraid. You're my direct subordinate in the Dark Unit, and you can be considered as my confidant. Although these things came from my mouth, you don't have to mind as long as you don't say it. It doesn't matter. You go to Nangong's house and ask Nangong to come over. I have something to discuss with him." Although Watergate's words were not so beautiful, but it made the Umbu feel warm in his heart. As the supreme leader of a shinobi village, Minato's means of understanding people's hearts can be said to be extremely superb. The Umbu kneeling in front of him is actually a new member of the Umbu under the Hokage. Minato's appearance at the moment is actually a kind of encouragement and test for his own Umbu. In the next month, there will be a confidant of Minato closely watching this Umbu to see if he is trustworthy. If he is trustworthy, naturally, everyone will be happy. If he is not trustworthy, then the result is naturally needless to say. A useless and untrustworthy person who has information that he shouldn't know, naturally, he will be given the home he deserves. Chapter 367. The efficiency of the Umbu ninja was quite good, and he quickly brought Nangongja, who had just been summoned by Watergate, to the Hokage's office. This little ninja, who was scared to death by Watergate, didn't dare to tell anyone that he didn't dare to directly appear in front of Nangongja as usual, but he respectfully knocked on the door of Nangongja's house and waited for a while until Nangongja opened the door for him. Throughout his career as an Umbu, this was simply the most embarrassing moment for him. But when this little Umbu was standing near Nangongja's house, he didn't dare to directly appear in someone else's house as usual. Because the feeling of danger was so clear, it was like a sword had been placed on his neck, so he didn't dare to be the slightest bit presumptuous. No one would tell this little Umbu that in fact, Nangongja had already discovered him a long time ago. Nangongja has always been very disgusted with the behavior of Umbu ninjas directly appearing in his house regardless of the occasion. So the moment he discovered this Umbu, Nangongja has already used a sure, which has been practicing for many years to suppress this little Umbu, and maybe this little Umbu will know what to do. Hokage-sama, I don't know why you called me here. Facing Watergate, Nangongja wasn't very respectful, but he also maintained the proper interests. The salute was reasonable, but it also seemed to be 1,000 miles away. Watergate saw Nangongja's attitude, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he walked to Nangongja's side with a smile and prepared to pat Nangongja's shoulder to show his kindness. When he found that Watergate wanted to pat his shoulder, Nangongja turned his body directly to avoid Watergate's action. But he didn't pat his shoulder, so Watergate's hand naturally made an ugly arc in the air. Even the little Umbu standing next to him and the few bodyguards hiding in the shadows saw Nangongja's alienation and distrust towards Watergate again and again. They felt uncomfortable and hungry in their hearts. But Watergate still maintained a smile and pulled out a chair next to him and said to Nangongja, and I don't have to be so polite, please take a seat. I'll tell you the purpose of calling you here today. Nangongja sat on the chair that Watergate pulled out for him just now without any self-awareness. Watergate looked at Nangongja helplessly and shook his head, then sat on the spacious chair behind the table. For some reason, Nangongja and Watergate didn't say anything. Finally, Watergate, because he had something to ask of Nangongja, finally took the initiative to speak. Today, I specially called you here to ask for your opinion on something. Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongja also sat up slightly and said to Watergate, "Please speak." Watergate tidied up his sleeves a little, sat up from the chair, and said to Nangongja, "As far as I know, Nangong Jonin was a teacher in the ninja school for a period of time. Although it wasn't a long time, every child who was taught by you in the ninja school praised you. Although we have been deliberately hiding it in the past few years, Wood Leaf Ninja has indeed reached the point of shortage. After the last Shinobi World War, there were a large number of casualties in our ninja village. And over the years, The original Jonin has gradually aged and their strength has declined, and the number of new Jonin is indeed not as large as the number of retired Jonin. Although some good seedlings have appeared in the ninja school in recent years, it still takes time for them to grow up. So, I invited you here this time to invite you to be the executor of the combat ninja training plan that was passed along with the medical ninja training plan, so that your experience and your strength can provide help to the children of Woodleaf Village who have not yet grown up, so that they can grow up quickly. Not only you, I also invited a lot of famous Woodleaf ninjas. Mike Guy who teaches Taijutsu, Kakashi who teaches ninjutsu, Kurenai who teaches jinjutsu, and many other strong Jonin. As long as we can work together, Woodleaf Village will definitely be able to. The more Watergate said, the more excited he became. His eyes had lost the original gentle light, and it was replaced by a strong sense of aggression. Just when Watergate was talking, Xianxia slowly stretched out his hand and pressed it in the air, indicating that Watergate didn't need to continue. Just now, no matter how Minato was alienated and distrusted by Xianxia, he could still maintain a gentle attitude. However, when Xianxia interrupted Minato's vision for the future, Minato felt a trace of anger that couldn't be suppressed. In an instant, Watergate's face became distorted. But soon Watergate suppressed this anger with his own reason, and the originally distorted face returned to a gentle and elegant appearance. Hokage-sama, I think you may have misunderstood. Xianxia's somewhat cold voice slowly flowed out of his mouth after Watergate's mood calmed down. Previously, I worked in the ninja school because my family was going to school at that time, and I didn't feel at ease leaving her alone in the school, so I asked Hokage-sama of 3 generations to arrange a small position in the school for me. As for what you said about me being loved by the students, I can only say that I'm not worthy of it, because what I do in the Ninja Academy is no different from some other teachers, and I'm even the kind of teacher who is more difficult to understand the hearts of the children. Combat Ninja is indeed extremely beneficial to Woodleaf, but I'm not a traditional ninja who practices internal energy. Whether it's my experience or my strength, it's not enough to bear such a heavy responsibility. Some of the ninjas listed by Hokage-sama before are fully capable of bearing the heavy responsibility of training the backbone of Woodleaf. If I'm added to them, wouldn't it be somewhat superfluous? So, I asked Hokage-sama to take back the order. If you need me to do some small things, of course, it's not a problem, but such an important task of training the future generations, I'm really powerless. As he spoke, Xianxia also slowly stood up. He clasped his hands together and gently bowed to Shui Min to express his unwillingness to take up the position. Chapter 368. In fact, when Watergate said to Xianxia that he needed Xianxia's help to train ninjas to ensure the basic strength of Woodleaf Village, Xianxia didn't believe a word of it. Over the years, as the head of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, Xianxia has also accumulated a certain amount of political experience. Whether it's advantages or disadvantages, they can't be directly put on the surface. At least 70% of what is said on the surface is a lie to achieve one's own goals. Woodleaf Village indeed suffered a lot of losses in the previous Third Shinobi World War, and there's a trend of a lack of manpower. But Woodleaf Village wasn't the only one that was damaged in the Shinobi World War. The other 4 large Shinobi villages also suffer a lot. So what does Watergate have to worry about? At least in the next few years, these Shinobi villages won't be able to launch a large-scale war. Why does Watergate have to be so eager to train Woodleaf Village's new strength? After thinking about it, Xianxia can only conclude that Watergate didn't do it for self-protection, but for improvement, gathering all the high-end strength in the Shinobi village, delaying the number of missions completed, and training more ninjas with combat ability. No matter how you think about it, it doesn't seem like something that a conservative person would do, right? And on the other hand, all the Shinobi villages are basically in a weak period. As long as he can become stronger, even if he isn't overwhelmingly strong, he can start with the medium-sized Shinobi villages and swallow their strength step by step, And then if the time is right, he can even bite off a piece of meat from the other large shinobi villages. Such a thing is too tempting. And even if the other 4 large shinobi villages find out about what Leaf Village's changes, they can't do anything, because accepting and completing missions is the guarantee of their survival. Wood Leaf Village has a large business, so it's not a big deal to slightly reduce the number of missions, but the other shinobi villages can't wait to get more missions instead of refusing to complete them. Therefore, in order to not be involved in such a quagmire, even if he and Watergate are not happy, Nangongja won't agree to Watergate's plan. In fact, what he wants is just a stable life. Since Wood Leaf Village can't achieve his goal, Nangongja can live without Wood Leaf. For Nangongja, Wood Leaf is just an ordinary place where he lives, and it doesn't matter if he changes it. But for Wood Leaf, Nangongja is a huge sign and a protective umbrella at the moment. They can't let Nangongja go, and even coax Nangongja to live a good life in Wood Leaf. Don't worry, I already understand what you mean. I'm not a person who will force people to do things. Nangong Jonin, you just need to remember that Wood Leaf is a very good place, and sometimes you need to help. Watergate said to Nangongja as he slowly opened Nangongja's hands. He didn't seem to care about Nangongja at all. Instead, he seemed to be very concerned about Nangongja. After that, Watergate and Nangongja casually talked about some common topics, and Watergate specifically asked one of his shadow guards to send Nangongja out of Hokage's office. After that, whether Watergate acted alone in his office, no one knows, but being treated like this by Nangongja, no one would be in a good mood, right? However, Nangongja didn't care. Anyway, he didn't have to stay in Wood Leaf. Whether it was the action against Danzo or the act of bringing his family back to Wood Leaf, in fact, Nangongja did it casually. There was no need to completely sell his life to Watergate. Because of these things, this was simply unrealistic. The medical ninja training program and the combat ninja training program were in full swing inside Wood Leaf at this moment. The entire Wood Leaf was shrouded in a positive mood. But Nangongja was completely unaffected. He just stayed at home every day and didn't show up. Every day, Nangongja didn't even touch Nangongja's sword, let alone practice swordsmanship day and night like before, except for some work from the blood-clothed pavilion. On the contrary, Nangongja bought a lot of books that had nothing to do with fighting. He just stayed at home all day and read books. It was very uncomfortable. Nangong Ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger, who lived with Nangongja, were also very curious. Nangongja, who didn't like such literary things in the past, suddenly read such literary books that he usually disdained. However, they were also very happy that Nangongja could stay at home like this. After all, Nangongja could be said to have become a good family man. Every day he would go to the market with Nangong Ro to buy ingredients for today's meal. When it was time to eat, he would stay in the kitchen with Mashiro to prepare 3 meals a day, which was quite decent. When he was free, he would bring Little Linger, who loved to play, to a beautiful place to have a few cookouts. He was simply too happy. Day by day, Nangongja was as excited as if he had retired early. The most obvious change was that his originally streamlined but very defined muscles were slowly becoming soft. Her originally thin face gradually became more plump, and her entire person looked more gentle. In the beginning, whether it was Watergate or Wood Leaf Village, some of the families who paid attention to Nangongja's changes, they still observed Nangongja's daily life, afraid that Nangongja was secretly preparing some kind of plan. However, as Nangongja continued to live like this, even his originally sharp aura began to slowly disappear. Watergate and the other families also quietly moved their eyes away from Nangongja's body. After all, everyone had their own things to do. It was not worthwhile to waste their resources on a person who only cared about his daily life. Time passed quietly, and the number of books Nangongja read had increased from the original few books to the number of books that filled several bookshelves. In the past 3 years, Nangongja had almost always maintained the life of a retired official. Moreover, if one took a closer look at the books on the bookshelves, one would notice that many of the books had very obvious traces of flipping. Some of the books even looked like they were unglued, which was enough to prove that Xianxia had indeed read many books. Chapter 369. Isn't this Xianxia's son? Did you come out to buy vegetables? Come and see, Annie. You just picked some vegetables from the field today. It's still fresh. Why don't you bring some home for the little girls to try? It was another early morning. Xianxia was holding a woven shopping bag that looked like it had been used for a long time. He was like a family cook as he shuttled between the vegetable stalls. An Annie who seemed to be familiar with Xianxia greeted Xianxia warmly. Her attitude was as friendly as seeing her own nephew. Xianxia also showed a very gentle smile on his face. He slowly walked in front of the Annie, picked up a few vegetables, and carefully looked at them. From time to time, he stretched out his hand and broke off a few leaves that didn't look so good or had a little bit of wormhole. The Annie looked at Xianxia breaking off pieces of vegetables, but she didn't seem angry at all. Instead, she had a smile on her face. Xianxia put all the vegetables he picked and the leaves he just broke off on the Annie's scale. Obviously, he wanted to weigh these leaves together with the vegetables. Looking at some of the vegetables he just took, Xianxia thought for a moment. As if he felt that it wasn't enough for his family, he squatted in front of some other vegetables and carefully picked them. While he was choosing, Xianxia also struck up a conversation with the middle-aged woman. "Auntie, your son is obviously a ninja. Why are you still buying vegetables? Although it's good to find something to kill time. After all, you're old. It's not good to wake up early and sleep late every day." Obviously, Xianxia chatted a lot with the Annie, so he knew about the situation of the Annie's family. When the Auntie heard Xianxia's words, the smile on her face was a little bit flaunting and full of simplicity. "My son is also lucky. After becoming a genin, he was selected to be in the training program. Now, he comes back every day and falls asleep on the bed like a dead pig. He's not as good as you, who can help with the housework every day." Obviously, she was belittling her son, but no matter how you listened to it, it felt like she was showing off. It's already extremely difficult for a civilian to become a ninja, not to mention that her own child was selected to participate in such a high-sounding plan. The vegetable Auntie often bragged about her child to others. Although her behavior was quite unscrupulous, Xianxia liked it because it was more realistic and interesting. "Auntie, I don't have any special skills. Back then, I relied on selling vegetables to raise my Jiro into a ninja bit by bit. Although my son has made a lot of money for the family over the years, I can't stay idle. I really don't want to waste such a good vegetable garden, so I come here every day to sell vegetables. It can be considered as finding a job for myself to subsidize the family." Both Xianxia and the Annie didn't take it seriously. They were just chatting while they were picking vegetables. Therefore, Xianxia didn't persist in persuading the Annie to go home and spend her old age in peace, but continued to pick the vegetables he needed. Just when Xianxia was seriously selecting the vegetables he needed, a very agile figure passed over Xianxia's head. The speed was so fast that no one could see the person's face clearly. They could only see that the person had a gorgeous golden hair like the sun. In Konoha, unless there is something urgent, most of the ninjas are very polite to walk on the streets instead of flying around on the rooftops. On the other hand, some young children who have just learned how to use chakra, so they like to jump around on the roof to play. The figure that just passed over Xianxia's head was obviously very big. It was not the size of a child's body. "Really, I don't know what's so urgent, but he's in such a hurry." Although she had seen a lot, it was still very uncomfortable to suddenly have a person fly over her head. The Auntie looked at the figure that flew away and muttered in her mouth. Xianxia, on the other hand, wasn't too concerned about someone flying over his head. Instead, he glanced at the white-haired, middle-aged man who was staring helplessly at the fleeing figure at the corner of the street with great interest. "Auntie, I'll leave these vegetables with you first. I saw someone I know, so I'll go and say hello first. I'll come back and get these things later. What do you think?" The Annie looked at Xianxia's face and naturally knew that Xianxia should have something to do. So she agreed and took the vegetables that Xianxia just picked out and put them beside her, waiting for Nangongja to come back and get it later. After Nangongja smiled at the auntie, he slowly walked to the corner of the street and patted the shoulder of the white-haired man who looked quite old. Jiraiya-sama, it's been a long time. Hearing the familiar voice, Jiraiya also turned his head and saw Nangongja patting his shoulder. In the past 3 years, Nangongja has changed a lot. His slightly rounder face and less sharp breath made Jiraiya a little stunned for a while before he recognized Nangongja. Yeah, I think Naruto is almost done with his training. So I brought this child back. But you have changed a lot in the past few years. I didn't recognize you for a while. Unlike Watergate, who has become more and more majestic over the years, Jiraiya is still so amiable. When he saw Nangongja's appearance, he even had the time to tease Nangongja a little. Nangongja also touched his face and said to Jiraiya with a smile on his face, "Don't worry. Originally, there were too many things pressing on me, so most of the time, I had a heavy face and was difficult to get close to. In the past few years, I pushed away all the work that I could push away." It's very comfortable to stay at home, read books, and cook. When there's no pressure in my heart, whether it's my face or other places, it's a little rounder. Looking at Nangongja's face and listening to Nangongja's words, Jiraiya didn't know why, but there was a faint feeling of envy in his heart. Isn't Nangongja's plain daily life what I want the most? But in the past few years, for the 3 generations, for Watergate, for Naruto, for Woodleaf, Jiraiya didn't seem to have a stable life. Instead, he was always running around, and the old look on his face became more and more obvious. Chapter 370. Your Life. Looking at Nangongja, Jiraiya was actually a little envious at the moment, because such a peaceful life really made him very fascinated. Anyway, I'm really happy to see you no longer have the original unapproachable appearance, but slowly have a mortal side. Yes, in Jiraiya's view, whether it was himself, Watergate, or Nangongja 3 years ago, they have actually broken away from the level of mortal. Because in their lives, there is no such thing as the most basic life. Every day is deceit, and every moment is a life and death battle. Such a life is not what a normal human being should have, and humans who have such a situation are naturally not normal mortals. On the contrary, the current Nangongja has an indescribable gentleness on his face all the time. Whether it is the breath on his body or the soft contour of his face, it makes people feel very comfortable. If Jiraiya had to find someone to compare with Nangongja, perhaps only Naruto, who has followed him for 3 years and whose strength has increased a lot, but has always retained the heart of a child, can have such qualifications, right? Even Watergate didn't have such a state. Naruto is like the sun hanging high in the sky, hot and intense, releasing his light and heat for everyone without reservation, making the ice in everyone's heart begin to dissipate under such sunshine. On the other hand, Nangongja was more like a stove used at home. It wasn't blazing hot, but it constantly emitted a warm aura. This kind of warmth was so quiet and refreshing, making everyone feel incomparably comfortable. The appearance of a mortal. After listening to Jiraiya's words, Nangongja slowly reached out and touched his face and said with amusement, "So becoming a mortal is just a little fat?" Then Jiraiya-sama, "You are also a standard mortal." Nangongja's words made Jiraiya laugh. Isn't this a way to say that I'm fat? When did the original Nangongja make such a joke with me? It can be seen that Nangongja has indeed changed a lot. You suddenly joked with me. I really can't accept it so quickly for a while. You used to be cold, but now you take the initiative to make fun of me. No, the difference is too big. I need to calm down. Jiraiya didn't pick up Nangongja's words just now. Instead, he directly told Nangongja that he couldn't accept Nangongja's change. Nangongja naturally understood Jiraiya's meaning. He understood that Jiraiya and Naruto had just returned to Woodleaf Village and must have a lot of things to do, so he immediately said to Jiraiya very understandingly, "Ha ha! I know that Jiraiya-sama should have just returned to Woodleaf, and Naruto hasn't seen his father and mother for a long time. You are also going to find them, right? I won't bother you today, but you must come to my house when you have time. In the past few years, I have been practicing my cooking skills, and I will make your eyes light up. Although Nangongja didn't say her name, both of them knew that Jiraiya must want to see the woman he loved deeply. So Nangongja also gave Jiraiya a good excuse to end the conversation. Jiraiya cupped his hand and said to Nangongja, "I'll leave first. Then I'll take my leave first. I reckon that there will be a lot of trivial matters in the next 2 days. If I have time, I will definitely come to your house and have a good taste of your self-praising skills." As soon as his voice fell, Jiraiya jumped to the roof, obviously chasing after Naruto, who had run away just now. Nangongja also slowly walked to the front of the stall of the Annie, who was selling vegetables just now, reached out, and took the vegetables he had just stored in the Annie's stall. He took out his wallet from the inner pocket of his coat, counted the money, and handed it to the Annie to pay the bill. The Annie looked at Nangongja curiously while giving Nangongja the change. Finally, it seemed that she couldn't hold back her curiosity and said to Nangongja, "Is the person who just talked to you Jiraiya-sama?" Hearing the Annie's question, Nangongja was a little surprised. After all, although Jiraiya's name was famous, there were not many people who could recognize his face. The last time Jiraiya appeared in Woodleaf was 3 years ago. It was amazing that the auntie could recognize Jiraiya. "It's indeed Jiraiya-sama. How did you recognize him?" Jiraiya-sama hasn't appeared in public for nearly 3 years. Hearing Nangongja's doubts, the auntie seemed to be excited for a while. She said to Nangongja with a red face, "I'm actually about the same age as Jiraiya-sama. Back then, Jiraiya-sama's house was not far from my house. We used to see each other all the time. No one would have thought that the little rascal who liked to peep at the women's bathhouse has now become a famous Sannin. Even Hokage-sama is Jiraiya's apprentice." Speaking of which, after the Water Sect came to power, there were quite a few people who dug up some things about the Water Sect. Watergate himself also wanted to use Jiraiya's reputation to cover up the fact that he was an orphan, so it could be regarded as promoting the more glorious side of Jiraiya. Although Nangongja knew that even the current Jiraiya was actually just a little rascal who peeped at the women's bathhouse. But now he not only peeped at the women's bathhouse, but also wrote a small book, but these words couldn't be said casually. After casually dealing with the auntie for a while, Nangongja carried some vegetables and walked in the direction of his home. During this time, Nangongja had basically taken over the responsibility of cooking at home. Even Mashiro is now only helping Nangongja when cooking. Today, because he met Jiraiya and chatted a few more words, now he actually came home 20 minutes later than usual. She still didn't know how hungry the girls and her family were. Thinking of this, Nangongja couldn't help but speed up his pace. There was no afterimage, no smoke, but Nangongja moved forward on the road at a very fast speed. Step by step, seemingly ordinary steps, he moved far more than the length of a step. Did Nangongja really waste 3 years like this? It was normal to solve the problem like this. Third, and the most important point, in fact, in Gaara's heart, he was very repulsed by Ichibi Shikaku in his body, so there was no way for him to fully communicate with Ichibi. Although Gaara's strength was not bad, he was far from reaching the real Kaga level, so now it was a good time to attack Gaara. These things will naturally be dealt with by the people who should have a headache. Nangongja thought for a while, but he didn't have any plans to help Sunagakure get through this difficult time. Woodleaf and Sunagakure have signed an offensive and defensive alliance after the Chunin exam 3 years ago. To a certain extent, Sunagakure has become half a vassal of Woodleaf. In order to protect the image of Woodleaf, Watergate will never sit back and watch Sunagakure suffer such a heavy blow. Although Woodleaf can't be said to have completely suppressed the ninja world, The effect of the medical ninja training program and the combat ninja training program in recent years is extremely significant. After so many years of sharpening their fangs, it's time to show their edge, isn't it? Mashiro was also a person with great political insight. When he heard Nangongj's words, he also understood the cause and effect of it, and the original worry in his eyes disappeared. He was the person who assisted Nangongja, and all the decisions were actually made by Nangongja in the end. As long as Nangongja didn't miss any important things, he naturally didn't have to say anything. After Nangongja understood all these things, he also focused on what to eat for breakfast at home. It's just that Japanese breakfast is actually very simple, mostly some rice, miso soup, tofu, fish, and so on. But after all, there are more girls in the family, and such a light breakfast is really not popular. So Nangongja gradually learned to make some breakfast with some Western characteristics to enrich the table. Looking at Mashiro, Nangongja tentatively asked, "How about we eat blueberry cream fruit muffins this morning?" Hearing the rather long name, Mashiro's eyes couldn't help but shine. It seems that at this moment, the refreshing sour taste of the blueberry, the delicate and soft sweetness of the cream, and the soft texture of the muffins have automatically emerged in his mind. Sure enough, never talk about desserts with girls. Otherwise, they definitely won't let it go. While Nangong's family was struggling with the problem of breakfast, at this moment in the Hokage's office, Watergate was looking at the child who has been away from him for 3 years. Uzumaki Naruto. The strong feeling from the bone marrow, from the depths of the blood, was washing Watergate's brain over and over again, and he opened his mouth again and again, but again and again he was speechless. At the best, Watergate slowly walked to Naruto's side. Looking at Naruto, who was almost the same height as him, he could only slowly say, "You've grown up." After saying such a dry word, for a while, Watergate, who was very talkative, couldn't say anything more at this moment. Jiraiya, who was standing next to the two, saw the strange atmosphere between the father and son, and said, Well, if there is anything you want to talk about between father and son, put it at home for the time being. I came back this time not only because of Naruto's success in training, so I came back to the village. The more important reason is that I found out through various channels that the Akatsuki is going to make a big move recently. I was worried that they might make a move on with Leaf, so I hurried back to remind you. Watergate. Chapter 372. With Jiraiya's help, the awkward atmosphere between Watergate and Naruto finally dissipated a little. Maybe all men are so clumsy? When it came to their true feelings, everyone's IQ and EQ plummeted, causing the situation to become extremely tense. Hearing Jiraiya's words, Watergate also sat back in his chair. In an instant, the charisma of a leader burst out directly from Watergate's body, in sharp contrast to the previous somewhat dull father image. Since Sensei has something to say, glancing at Naruto standing next to Jiraiya, Watergate continued, Naruto, you go home first. Shinakushina is waiting for you at home. I still have something to discuss with Sensei. As expected by Naruto, when Watergate encountered such a matter involving with Leaf and the ninja world, Watergate would definitely stick to the bottom line and not let Naruto, who was only a genin, participate in it. Then I'll go first. After slightly saluting his father and Jiraiya, Naruto also left Hokage's office. Looking at Naruto's leaving figure, Jiraiya said to Watergate with some bitterness, You usually look so smart, but how come you are even more dull than Sensei when it comes to Naruto's problem? Over the past few years, I have been with Naruto day and night, and I can be regarded as someone who understands Naruto's mind more. If you always have such an attitude, even if Naruto wants to reconcile with you, he may not be able to do it. Watergate heard Jiraiya's complaint, but he didn't seem to have any emotional fluctuations. He still said with a flat face, Let's talk about this another day. After all, Naruto and I are father and son. There will always be a chance to explain these misunderstandings. Now, the most important thing is the movement of Akatsuki in the ninja world. I can't let with Leaf decline in my hands. Jiraiya glanced at Watergate, who was sitting on a large chair and muttered to himself. As expected, both the father and the son are a pair of idiots. Watergate raised his eyebrows slightly. Although Jiraiya's voice was very low, Watergate could still hear it with his hearing. Perhaps Jiraiya was muttering so that Watergate could hear him. We didn't know all this, but after this little complaint, Jiraiya told Watergate some information about Akatsuki that he just mentioned. "Mom, I'm back." Naruto took out the key that he hadn't used for several years from his pocket and opened the door of his house. He habitually shouted towards the house. It was okay that he didn't shout. As soon as he shouted, there was a burst of sound of pots and pans in the house. Obviously, Xianxia heard Naruto's voice, and she was in a hurry. After a while, Xianxia, wearing an apron and holding a pan in her hand, ran out of the house. Her white face was stained with a little black stain, and there was a faint smell of cooking oil. It looked like she was cooking. Naruto looked at his mother coming out, and his face showed a bright smile. It was completely different from the dull expression he had when he saw Watergate just now. Slowly opening his hands, Naruto was ready to hug his mother. However, watching Xianxia's figure rushing towards him faster and faster, Naruto had a bad feeling in his heart. In particular, Xianxia's face was getting clearer and clearer in Naruto's eyes, and the blue veins on her forehead were so obvious. "You bastard!" She raised the pan in her hand high, and the black bottom of the pan even appeared a little blurred under the effect of speed and strength. Bang! Naruto was directly hit in the cheek by the pan, and his whole body flew up and smashed into the wall. Immediately, the originally smooth wall had been printed with the faint figure of Naruto. But if you look carefully, you will find that there's another mark on the wall that Naruto hit that is not so similar to Naruto's figure. Let's give the best blessing to Watergate and Naruto and live on. You clearly said that you will write to me every week and send me at least one photo every month. But look at it yourself. Xianxia took out a large box from nowhere, and after opening the lid of the box, letters and photos leaked out. Looking at these letters and photos, Xianxia, who originally looked aggressive, immediately looked like a different person at the moment, looking extremely weak. You sent me 16 letters and 5 photos less. Do you know how worried your mother was when she didn't receive your letter? Although Jiraiya-sensei is very powerful, he is careless. If I accidentally hurt you, even what should I do? As she spoke, a few tears came out from the corner of Xianxia's eyes. Naruto is a slightly dull person, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't understand his mother's love for him. Naruto actually remembers these 16 letters and 5 photos, but Naruto still didn't send them. Xianxia's guess is right. He did not send these letters because of injuries and other reasons. But how can he say directly, "Mom, it's my fault. I really forgot those few times." Although Horny Sage is a pervert, he is still very powerful. I have learned a lot from him in the past few years. Don't blame him. Naruto buckled himself down from the wall and slowly walked to his mother to comfort her. Xianxia finally broke free from the sad mood and looked up at her child carefully. Although she could see the photos, it was not as real as what she saw with her own eyes. "My child." Xianxia slowly stood up straight and compared herself with her child, and found that she was no longer as tall as Naruto. The child who originally lived with her, with a snot hanging from his nose, has now become a heroic and vigorous young man. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Mom made a lot of food for you, all of which are your favorite. Let's go eat, and then you can tell me about your experience in the past few years, okay?" Hearing Xianxia say that she made food, Naruto's face, which was originally black because of the attack from the bottom of the pot, became darker at this moment. Chapter 373. As for Xianxia's cooking, well, let's not comment too much. Otherwise, the frying pan that made Naruto and Watergate suffer so much will fall on our heads. All we need to know is that 3 days after Naruto and Xianxia had a meal together, Naruto lost 5 kilograms. Naruto, who had just returned to Woodleaf, naturally had to visit his friends whom he hadn't seen for a long time. So the days flew by just like that. Naruto naturally didn't forget Xianxia, who had always taken care of him since he was a child. At this moment, Naruto was standing in front of Xianxia's house with the gift his mother prepared. Because it wasn't convenient for him to knock on the door with both hands, Naruto clamped the gift he was holding in his right hand under his left arm. He extended his hand and gently knocked on the beautiful red wooden door of the Xianxia family. Soon, a response was heard from the courtyard. The door creaked open, and Naruto was able to see Uncle Xianxia, whom he hadn't seen for several years. Even though Kushina repeatedly told Naruto that Xianxia had changed a lot in the past few years, Naruto was still so shocked that the gift in his hand fell to the ground. Fortunately, Kushina was careful when she prepared the gift and didn't put anything fragile in it. Otherwise, so many gifts would have been wasted. Naruto came around 11 o'clock, and it was almost lunchtime. Naruto probably chose this time to avoid being baptized by his mother's delicious food. Since he was a child, Naruto liked to eat at Xianxia's house. After all, Mishiro's cooking was really good. Xianxia had begun to take on the responsibility of cooking for his family in the past few years. So at this moment, Xianxia was wearing an apron and holding a big spoon in his hand to open the door for Naruto. Xianxia's somewhat round face and gentle temperament reminded Naruto of the cafeteria uncle when he was in ninja school. Uncle Xianxia. Looking at Xianxia's current appearance, Naruto stuttered, "Although I've always called you uncle, you have always been super handsome in my heart. That cool temperament and handsome face. How did you really become an uncle now?" Naruto's relationship with Xianxia was very good, so he could make some harmless jokes. Xianxia was naturally aware of the changes he had undergone in the past few years. Being teased by Naruto, whom he had watched grow up, Xianxia also smiled and stretched out a hand to flick Naruto's forehead. "Even you're teasing me like this? You came at the right time. Today, I suddenly wanted to make ramen. It seems that even God wants me to invite you to eat at my house." Xianxia was naturally very clear about Naruto's love for ramen. Today, he really suddenly wanted to make ramen, and then Naruto came over. It was an inexplicable fate, right? Ramen? When he heard about ramen, Naruto had already become excited. "Let me tell you, Uncle Xianxia, I have eaten a lot of famous ramen in the ninja world with lascivious sage in the past few years. But I still think that Raku family's ramen is the best. The ramen made by Uncle Baku is simply amazing. I don't know what Uncle Xianxia's ramen will look like." Hearing Naruto's words, Naruto seemed to be questioning his cooking skills. For a moment, Xianxia didn't know where some unknown fire came from. He said to Naruto, "Then I will make it for you to see. I want to eat your tongue in my stomach." "Ahaha, then I will wait and see what kind of ramen Uncle can make," Naruto said to Xianxia with a happy smile. The two also ended the conversation and walked into Xianxia's house together. Today, Little Linger and Xianxia went out to do something. Only Mishiro and Xianxia were at home, but Xianxia prepared a lot of ingredients. Obviously, it was prepared for Little Linger and Xianxia who would come back from playing. Seeing Naruto at home, Mishiro also said to Naruto very gently, "I heard from Miyagi that you came back, but I didn't see you at home. It seems that the smell of ramen today attracted you here?" Facing Mishiro's teasing, Naruto didn't act as unrestrained as when he was talking to Xianxia at the door. Instead, he said to Mishiro shyly, "Mishiro-san, don't laugh at me. These days, Kakashi-sensei asked me to check my progress. Sakura-sen asked me to tell her about my experience in the ninja world, and even Shikamaru and Choji pestered me to treat them. After a few days, it finally calmed down, so I quickly came to see you." When Naruto spoke, his nervous and serious attitude directly made Mishiro laugh. She walked to Naruto's side and said to Naruto with a slightly reproachful tone, "You child, big sister is just joking with you. Why are you so serious? I know that you will be busy after coming back. Your Uncle Xianxia and I have been at home all the time, and we're not in a hurry for you to come to see us. As long as you can come, it is already very good." Kushina was born with a bad temper. Although her love for Naruto was unquestionable, she was also a little violent. But Mishiro was different. She was a woman as gentle as water. Every time Naruto came to Nangong's house, Mishiro would be so gentle, which made Naruto's heart faintly have the idea of putting Mishiro in the same position as his mother. So when facing Mishiro, Naruto always couldn't help but relax. Mishiro, you and Naruto go to the living room and chat first. We haven't seen each other for so long. I think Naruto has a lot to say to you. The porcupine bone soup for our ramen is almost cooked to perfection. I can also prepare the other ingredients myself. Go and have a good chat with Naruto. Nangongja naturally saw that Mishiro was very happy that Naruto could come, so he said to Mishiro in a timely manner. After so many years, Nangongja and Mishiro no longer had the polite modesty between them. Since Nangongja said that he could handle it, Mishiro was very happy and pulled Naruto to the living room to chat. Seeing the two of them chatting so happily, Nangongja's mood was also a lot better. He turned around and began to prepare the various ingredients that were going to be used, preparing to make delicious ramen for his family and Naruto. Chapter 374. In fact, Japanese ramen has a disguised feeling of fast food, because whether it's the side dishes or the soup, they can all be prepared in advance. When it's time to make ramen, all you need to do is boil the ramen in boiling water, then pour into a bowl, pour the soup over it, and add the side dishes, and the bowl of ramen is complete. Nangongja's ramen at noon today is the very famous Bodo ramen, which is a kind of ramen famous for its rich soup and slender noodles. In order to make the ramen look more appetizing, Nangongja also prepared crinoline, bean sprouts, green onions, fish cakes, dried bamboo shoots, and thick spiral-shaped barbecued pork rolls. Putting the ramen filled with white soup, slender noodles, and rich side dishes on a tray, Nangongja brought such a well-made ramen to the living room. Naruto was still chatting with Mishiro, talking about his experiences in the shinobi world, and he looked very happy. But when Nangongja walked into the living room with the ramen, Naruto's words came to an abrupt end. Turning his head stiffly, Naruto's eyes were filled with a fanatical look at the moment. You know, even if the taste of the ramen wasn't that good, Naruto still regards the 3 minutes as the most painful time for him. Not to mention a bowl of freshly made ramen that exudes a tempting aroma. Seeing Naruto's eagerness, Mishiro also moved aside a little, letting Nangongja directly put the bowl of ramen in front of Naruto. You know, under normal circumstances, if you want to eat, you have to eat at the dining table. But considering the degree of familiarity between him and Naruto, Mishiro also let Naruto sit in the living room and eat the ramen directly. How is it Uncle's technique is pretty good, right? I said I'll let you eat your tongue into your stomach, so I'll let you eat your tongue into your stomach? As he spoke, Nangongja's face was filled with pride, as if he had accomplished something amazing. At this moment, Naruto was as devout as a believer. With a different kind of seriousness in his eyes, he picked up the chopsticks that Nangong Zetsu casually put on the tray. He clasped his hands together and clamped the chopsticks between his thumb and index finger. He gently touched his forehead with his fingertips and said softly, "I'm going to eat." Naruto, who directly began his battle to conquer the ramen, gently separated the side dishes and noodles with chopsticks, holding the bowl with both hands, his mouth close to the edge of the bowl, obviously ready to taste the soup base of the ramen. Looking at Naruto's serious and devout appearance while eating the ramen, Nangongja and Mishiro simply couldn't connect this Naruto at this time with his usual lively appearance. Looking at Naruto like this, Nangongja couldn't help but smile, and then he also prepared the ramen for himself and Mishiro for lunch. On the other side, although Naruto looked particularly devout when eating, his speed was still very fast, and the noises he made when eating noodles were very loud. The sound of slurping was endless, and Nangongja was very happy to see that Naruto could like his ramen so much. But the so-called happiness was always temporary, and he didn't know when troubles would befall him. Naruto put the last piece of roasted pork in his bowl between his chopsticks, and his nose slightly opened to smell the wonderful aroma of the roasted pork. Just as this delicious roasted pork was about to enter his mouth, a burst of cramped knocking on the door interrupted Naruto's pilgrimage eating journey. Although Xianxia didn't look as serious as Naruto when eating ramen, he still didn't like people interrupting his meal like this. Sitting next to him, Mashiro was about to get up and open the door. Xianxia stood up and walked towards the door by himself. Without asking who was standing outside the door, Xianxia directly opened the door of his house. And standing outside the door was an Umbu ninja who was wrapped up in a thick cloak. Respectfully bowing to Xianxia, the Umbu ninja said to Xianxia, "Sorry to disturb you." Hearing the Umbu ninja's words, Xianxia also slightly loosened his frown, but he still said to the Umbu ninja, "Since you already know that you are rude, then I hope you can give me a reason to forgive your rudeness. This time, I'm not conveying orders to Xianxia-sama, but to Naruto, who is in your house. Sorry, due to my duty, I can't tell you the details of the truth. After all, an Umbu ninja is an Umbu ninja, and he still has the basic quality. Regarding the confidential information that may be involved in his mission, the Umbu ninja will never leak the slightest bit." Xianxia looked at the Umbu ninja and slowly moved his body away from the door, allowing the Umbu ninja to directly enter the yard. The Umbu ninja saw Naruto at a glance and directly walked in the direction of Naruto and slowly leaned over to Naruto's ear and whispered a few words. For a while, Naruto's face became rich, and the barbecued pork that attracted Naruto's attention no longer seemed important at this moment. Has this information been confirmed? As if to convince himself, Naruto asked the Umbu ninja. It's true, the information was directly passed from the elders of Sunagakure. Hokage-sama has decided to let you and other people form a team to temporarily go to the Sunagakure to observe, and the main force will be dispatched when it is unavoidable. The Umbu ninja lowered his voice and explained to Naruto. Naruto nodded, stood up, and said to Xianxia, "Uncle Xianxia, I'm sorry, I suddenly have an urgent matter, so I'll go first. But Uncle, your ramen is really delicious. If possible, I'd like to swallow my tongue into my stomach." After a slight salute to Xianxia, Naruto and the Umbu jumped on the eaves and poles toward the Hokage's office. Sunagakure. Sure enough, it's not a cover-up. Xianxia actually heard the Umbu ninja's words very clearly. So combined with his own information, it's not difficult to know that the Akatsuki has already started to attack the Sunagakure. A ferocious tiger that had been dormant for so many years had finally bared its fangs. Don't know how many people, under the gaze of this tiger, will be unable to protect themselves? Strengthen the monitoring of the Sunagakure and the Akatsuki. If there is any abnormality, immediately report to me. If necessary, I can also directly go to the Sunagakure to participate in the battle. Looking at Mashiro sitting next to him, Xianxia firmly issued an order, and Mashiro nodded and passed Xianxia's order to the other members of Bloodcloth Pavilion. Chapter 375. Naruto. This is all the information we already know. Looking at Naruto, standing in front of him with a serious look, Watergate slowly put the information in his hand with the word confidential written on his table. We have confirmed the authenticity of this letter through various means, but counting the time on the road and various delays, it is now the second day since Gaara was kidnapped. We know that Akatsuki has a great desire for Bijou, so we can't guarantee Gaara's safety at this moment. However, this letter is only sent to us in the name of Sunagakure, not in the name of the Land of Wind. So we can't send a large number of ninjas into the territory of the Land of Wind so rashly. So this time we can only send a small number of ninjas into the territory of the Land of Wind. And our final decision is to send Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Hatake Kakashi to carry out this mission. The current mission level is A level, but it can be upgraded to S level or even higher depending on the situation. Looking at Naruto, Watergate really felt that his child had grown up for a while. According to his previous personality, After hearing that he thought that Gaara's life might be in danger and that there was no way to send a large number of ninjas to increase the number of ninjas, it is estimated that he would immediately explode. But now, although there is still anger in his eyes, he can completely control himself. As the Jinchuriki of the irritable Kyuubi, being able to control his violent temperament to such a degree is already a very powerful thing. Watergate slowly walked to Naruto's side and put his hand on Naruto's shoulder, gently rubbing twice. Looking at his son, who was almost as tall as himself, Watergate slowly put his mouth to Naruto's ear. I only know that you are angry, and I know that you can't wait to get rid of those ninjas of Akatsuki at this moment. But don't do it, because you know the gap between you, and such a gap can't be made up for by a moment of courage. Remember your mission. You are a ninja for investigation, not a ninja for combat. No matter what, he had to protect himself and return safely. Mom and I will wait for you at home. We will wait for you to come back safe and sound. After hearing the first half of Watergate's words, Naruto became even angrier because Naruto felt that Watergate didn't trust him. But later, Naruto found that it didn't seem to be what he thought. His father, who was called Hokage by everyone, was actually not that cold and ruthless. On the contrary, he seemed to have some faint concern for his son. Over the years, Naruto has traveled in the shinobi world and has seen all kinds of people and encountered all kinds of things. Gradually, he began to understand the emotional problems between people. Thinking back to the past few days when she was at home, Watergate was obviously very busy, but he still insisted on having dinner with his family at home. I know. I will come back safe and sound. Naruto's voice was slightly hoarse because of his emotional fluctuations, but it was obvious that the child had recovered his usual calmness at this moment. Sensei, in that case, we will go first. Kakashi looked at the interaction between the father and son, and for a moment, there was a little envy in his eyes. If his father was still alive, would he care about him like his sensei? Of course, these are meaningless assumptions. White Fang is already dead, isn't he? Hearing Kakashi's words, Watergate also restored his majestic image as the Hokage. Be careful. No matter what happens, Wood Leaf will be your strongest support. Miyagi, the latest information is here. In Nangongja's house, Mashiro was holding a leather bag and walking in front of Nangongja at this moment. Nangongja took it and checked the ink on it. Then Nangongja gently opened the bag, slowly taking the information in his hand and carefully observing the blurry photos. Nangongja's eyebrows slowly wrinkled a little bit. Akatsuki actually have a way to quickly seal a bijou and transfer it? Well, if they don't have such ability, how could they dare to attack a bijou? Over the years, although Nangongja was clear about Akatsuki's desire for bijou, Nangongja always thought that Akatsuki's plan was to capture bijou column force and then take him to Amigakure or other hidden places to seal him. After all, sealing a bijou not only requires an extremely powerful sealing technique, but also the right time, the right place, and the right people, all of which are indispensable. But according to this information, at this moment, Akatsuki's ninja actually brought bijou column force, Gaara, to the country of Kawa, which is not that big. There is no possibility of sealing a bijou in such a place. Akatsuki naturally has its own method to quickly seal a bijou. If this is the case, Akatsuki is more dangerous than Nangongja thought. This time it seems that I have to go and see what is going on. If I can't figure out how Akatsuki seals a bijou, I really can't calm down. Looking at Mashiro standing beside him, Nangongja continued to say, "Help me prepare. I will leave for the country of Kawa immediately." Although Mashiro was reluctant to part with Nangongja's departure, he still had to get used to such a life after so many years. 3 years. This man used 3 years to smooth his edges and accompany his family. But at this moment, he once again needed to wear a robe and a sword. After bringing Nangongja's robe and Heaven's Disaster sword to Nangongja, Nangongja stretched out his hand and gently stroked the dark pattern on his black robe, then grabbed the collar and shook it directly on his body. He kneeled on one knee, slightly bowed his body, and lifted his heaven's disaster sword. After 3 years, the Yama, wearing a black robe and carrying a black ancient sword, finally returned again. "You're so white." I've really enjoyed the life I've been living for the past few years. Every day, I am busy with the trivial affairs of the family. Although it is complicated, I'm also very happy. Just wait. As long as these things are over, our family will continue to live like this. Although his disguise was still that murderous Yama, the tenderness in Nan Gong's eyes at this moment was no different from when he was buying vegetables and cooking in these years. "I believe in you. No matter when, no matter where." Looking at Nan Gongzhou, Mishiro said. Chapter 376. In a secret cave in the country of Kawano, all the members of Akatsuki were present. The 10 fingers of Geto Mazo were also full of people except for the left little finger. But except for Deidara and Sasori, the others were summoned by the secret ninjutsu of Akatsuki. Just before Sasori and Deidara kidnapped Gaara, the other 8 core members of Akatsuki had already arrived here. The sealing technique used to seal the tailed beast was naturally not so easy to perform. Akatsuki's sealing technique used the power of Geto Mazo. Under the guidance of the chakra of Akatsuki's members, the tailed beast was stripped and sealed in the body of Geto Mazo. At this moment, Gaara was being held in midair by an invisible force, and the 9 official members of Akatsuki continued to inject chakra into Geto Mazo. The 9 eyes of Geto Mazo that were originally closed were half opened at this moment, and the mouth that was originally closed was now slowly opening. Now, as the main caster, Pain was naturally the one who could sense the state of the Geto Golem the best. So at this moment, Pain suddenly made a lot of hand gestures with his fingers. There were even many unconventional hand gestures among them. Then he shouted, "Sealing technique, illusory Dragon 9 seals." The other members standing on the fingers of Geto Mazo looked pale at this moment, because the chakra in their bodies was being sucked out by Geto Mazo at a siphon speed. The huge loss of chakra is not something that anyone can bear, and the effect of this huge amount of chakra was naturally very outstanding. The mouth of the Geto Mazo, which was originally slowly opening, was now completely opened. It even made people feel that the Geto Mazo was roaring at the top of its lungs due to the hunger in its stomach. 9 dragon-shaped chakra streams, condensed from chakra, gushed out from Geto Mazo's mouth at this moment. The dragon-shaped chakra was like a real dragon at this moment, dancing in the air. Pain stared at Gaara, who was floating in the air. This was the first tailed beast that the Akatsuki had officially captured. Failure was not allowed. Controlling the 9 chakra to move slowly in the direction of Gaara. The 9 chakra that originally seemed to have no target were now like sharks that smelled blood. They automatically rushed in the direction of Gaara without Pain's guidance. 9 dragon-shaped chakra hovered in the air, gradually forming a spherical chakra ball that enveloped Gaara. However, the 9 dragon-shaped chakra figures were still clearly visible. As they continued to move, Gaara's face began to turn hideous and painful. Because the Ichibi Shikaku sealed in Gaara's body was connected to Gaara's life. Every bit of power extracted from the Ichibi Shikaku was the same as extracting Gaara's vitality. Gradually, the sphere formed by the 9 dragon-shaped chakra has changed from the original azure blue color to a slightly pale yellow color that looked a bit jumbled. Pain also looked at this chakra ball with satisfaction, and once again controlled the 9 chakra from the Geto Mazo to return to the Geto Mazo. Looking at the other 9 members of the Akatsuki, Pain said, "Today is just the beginning. The 9-tailed beasts will definitely be in our pocket, and we will bring eternal peace to the ninja world. After the other members have a good rest, you should speed up your task. As for Sasori and Deidara, you are, after all, outside our sphere of influence, and now you have consumed too much chakra because of using the ninjutsu of the Genria 9 seals. So, I hope you can keep a low profile and leave the country of River and return to our sphere of influence as soon as possible." With that said, Pain glanced at Daidara's empty left arm without a trace. Daidara's ability mainly comes from the various applications of his own explosive clay. Usually, the explosive clay is mostly swallowed by the strange mouth of Daidara's hands. Daidara is now missing an arm, and his combat power has really decreased a lot. Pain was thinking about how to deal with Daidara at this moment. It's really hard to choose whether to get rid of him directly or let him continue to use his remaining power. Daidara seemed to be aware of Pain's gaze, and his eyes were full of resentment and madness. Who would want to be a person without an arm? But all of this was caused by his carelessness when fighting with Gaara. His arm was directly crushed into a pool of mud, and there was no possibility of repair. "Damn it," Deadale murmured softly. No one knew who he was venting his anger at. Sasori, who was standing next to Daidara, took a deep look at Daidara at this moment. Although Daidara was usually crazy, it was the first time he was full of resentment like this. Sasori's somewhat stupefied eyes slowly turned a few times. No one knew what he was thinking about, and he had already retracted his gaze. After hearing Pain's order, the projections of several other official members of the Akatsuki organization also disappeared one by one. The originally huge Geto Mazo also disappeared with a huge cloud of smoke at this moment. The originally huge cave had now become spacious and empty. Sasori and Daidara looked at each other and nodded to each other. Apparently, they were ready to leave this cave and return to the Rain Country as soon as possible to recuperate for a period of time. But man proposes, God disposes. Just as the two of them were about to move, Scorpion stopped Deadale. "Our barrier has been tampered with." Previously, in order to ensure the smooth progress of the seal, Sasori and Daidara set up a protective barrier on the periphery of this cave. Although it had no attack power, its defensive ability was extremely strong. When several talismans as the Eye of the Array were touched, Sasori, who was the one who set up the barrier, naturally sensed it. Just in time, this uncle was worried about having nowhere to vent. "Let them see this uncle's art." Daidara shouted with a trace of excitement, but he couldn't hide the panic from the bottom of his heart. After all, he had just suffered a heavy blow, and the chakra in his body was also greatly consumed. At this moment, could Daidara really display his full strength? "You go first, I'll bring up the rear," Sasori said very coldly to Daidara. "What do you mean?" After hearing his partner's words, Daidara's complexion changed. "You know what I mean? Now you are just a burden." Perhaps Sasori realized how hurtful his words were, or perhaps Sasori didn't realize it at all. But the effect of Sasori's words was indeed very outstanding. Although Daidara was indignant at this moment, he still used his remaining chakra, an explosive clay, to make a clay bird. He sat on it and flew out from a hidden vent at the top of the cave. Only a voice was still echoing in Sasori's ears. "I'm leaving, but you can't die easily, otherwise I will laugh at you for a long time." That you're tuning in to the Eternal Immortal Ballad YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.